Hello, everybody. If it's Wednesday, it's Warhammer, and that must mean it's time for another episode of Warhammer Weekly. Joining me, as always, my co-host, Tom. How you doing, buddy?
Hey, friends.
Good to see you tonight, Tom. Also joining us this week to discuss the bountiful gifts of Grandfather Nurgle, somebody who's been having an on and off relationship with Grandfather for a long time. He's been a dabbler. He's been all in, and he's back again. It's Paul Conti. How you doing, buddy?
What's happening, nerds? And I have to say, I've done a little bit of research. You know what this show marks?
You have the most appearances on our show.
Well, tied with Mitch.
Oh, tied with Mitch. I just knew, like, for some reason, I knew that was going to be a thing.
So how many times have you been on then? What's the number?
I think this is like 8.
Wow. That's pretty good.
Wow. We've had Mitch on way too many times.
Now, are you counting
No, I love you, Mitch.
events?
I mean, you are overrepresenting New Jersey is what you're doing.
It's clear. It's clear.
We need like our own Saturday Night Live 5-timers club.
Yes.
Right? Like we need to open with a skit for that. Yeah.
Yeah. We need jackets.
Sure. I'll get
pipes.
I'll get a special shirt made up for the 5-timers club, and I'll give that out to anybody who hits it. I'd have to keep like a running total of all the shows and who's the guest, but that's fine. I could get that.
Seems like a lot of work.
I mean, it's fine.
I'm not gonna lie. The like flipping through old Warhammer weeklies took a while, and I'm not even going to make an attempt at like who has been the most frequent guest overall on your channel.
Sure.
Me.
Like, all
the
those
answer's me.
And stuff like people popped in and out.
Sure.
There was the ever so brief War Games. You remember War Games?
That happened. Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I remember winning so hard that it shut it down.
At any rate, we're going to talk about Nurgle tonight. Tom and Paul are both Nurgle enthusiasts. I am a well-known non-enthusiast, so it should be a good conversation. The reality is, that book has been out for almost a year. It's gotten some recent traction and attention, and I thought it'd be a good time to revisit it.
It won a number 1 over the weekend. I just can't find which event that was.
It won PAX, but it was a 1-day. It was a 3-game.
Oh, was it? Yeah. It was PAX 3-day 1 game. Kind of a best of Nurgle list.
Strike that, reverse it, but yes, that's correct. 3-game 1-day.
It was he also
3-day 1 day. It was a really long game.
Really long game. Epic. 35,000 points aside. It really took a while to grind down. Yeah.
The same guy that won that event piloted the same list at Nova and went 5-1.
Oh,
nice.
Well, there you go. Nice. I really liked the list. I thought it was very cool. So we can kind of talk that through amongst other things. But of course, first off, we begin with the news. Tom, what do we got, buddy?
We have a torch.
We do have a torch. I'll bring up the torch. Then we can go to Paul's torch because Paul has just like, he's got this idea in his head. So I'm excited. We'll see what Paul thinks.
I mean, I know what this is, but
you're sure. All right, here we go. I'm sharing up now. Here's our torch.
With the level of detail going on.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So this is our torch. We all see the torch.
Yes, it is.
Okay. Now, before we go past this, let's understand that we are pretty zoomed in here, right? We can see the broad paint strokes of like the sort of fatty edge highlighting here.
Yeah, it's kind of a teeny torch.
Not the biggest torch.
It's a tiki torch.
Looks like many torches that are in the game, very clearly expressing movement. It's not because like it has this swoopy loop smoke as opposed to the straight up and down smoke. So it's not a static model.
Yep.
So it's probably on a model that looks as though it's moving in some way, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Now, it also looks like it's on some sort of pole of some sort.
Let me
much like a tiki torch, as Tom said.
Yeah, I said.
Yeah. It's the kind of thing you would set up outside, keep the mosquitoes away.
It's for the new Moon clan. Get it?
The pilot of that Nurgle list, by the way, is in the chat and said he went 4-2 at Nova, not 5-1. He fell asleep in game 6. There you go. Not literally like he missed something. He doesn't mean he literally fell asleep. He just means like he missed a trick he should have pulled and, gave up the game. As happens to any of us. 6 games is a long weekend, man. Game 6 is rough. It's an endurance match. All right. So, Paul, you now have an image you would like to show us. So share your image, and then I will click over to you.
Hold on. Let me find where I put that. Okay.
You're as bad as I am.
Well, I mean, it was just in a different tab.
If it was Tom, he'd start tab switching while he's sharing screens, and we'd be looking at like other stuff.
True.
We all wait with bated breath. All right. Okay. So here is your image.
This is a flagellant head.
Yes, it is.
The thing that I wanted to point out here is that the structure is almost exactly the same.
Mm-hmm.
You have these like the vertical pieces. I'm pointing at my screen, like anybody else can actually see that.
Sure.
The
Here,
vertical.
I'll point for you. We have these vertical pieces here. Yes.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So we got the vertical pieces. The only difference there is that the ones on the flagellant head are slightly shorter at the top. Otherwise, the spacing is almost identical. It is a 4-pronged. There's like 4 vertical prongs in both. The placement of the rivets is the same. The vertical being behind the horizontals is the same.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I know I've seen a bunch of people say, well, that's just a generic brazier. It's just, to me, hitting so many points of it being the exact same thing or very, very, very close that it just says that it's devoted of Sigmar related in some way.
Okay. So make your call. Is your call that, so let's assume that this is a devoted to Sigmar thing. What's the call out of that? What do you think it is?
That's a very good question. Because I still genuinely don't think we're getting a devoted to Sigmar release. So what could it be along those lines? We could get another one-off model like the Excelsior War Priest.
Sure.
The other interesting thought that I had was that it could be actually part of Dark Oath and have some part of the Dark Oath lore be that like there's a bunch of people that had been devoted to Sigmar and they accidentally worship the wrong gods and now they're okay.
Sure. Okay.
I mean, I think if you're going to go that way, I think you're more likely to say that this is next season's Shadespire release.
Sure.
That is very possible too.
Like, if you're going to go with Devoted, I think that's the more likely possibility, unless you end up with like a joint city book like Citizens of Azir, which we've been talking about. But more likely than I think any of that, I think it's a sister battle.
Yeah, so it has here's what my argument would be.
It's like a penitent engine or something.
Sure. Here's my argument about it. It's a very gothic brazier, right? That bent iron is meant to be that old world gothic look, right? Now, although I don't disagree with you that it does look like that Devoted, I would argue that's simply the shorthand for something that has that old world gothic feel, which means that either it could easily be 40K, because some of the sisters models do carry that extremely ornate gothic style stuff. So there and torches on their backpacks or heads or whatever are not that out of the question. I would also argue it could easily be anything. Yeah, I think your chaos story couldn't fall off the mark if they were trying to communicate Dark Oath as feeling older than the rest, as being barbaric in the modern terms of what the Mortal Realms now looks like would be the gothic of the old world, actual, sort of normal civilization, right? so it could easily be that. I think in the end I don't think it's an underworld thing. My thing is actually, I just think it's a piece of terrain. So I'm going to go ahead and go against what I said about movement, because that stick on the bottom, I'm just going to argue it's a piece of terrain. That's my call. There you go.
And it could just be representing wind.
Sure. They just want to make the piece of terrain more interesting. So there's like 4 torches on it, and everything has like a float to the smoke.
Yep. Oh, that's no. Yeah.
There you go. Hey, we all don't know. So that's my call. But I think all those are, whatever possible. Like, I hope we start getting more. Here's the thing. I hope that's a Sister of Battle brazier, and I'll tell you why. Because that means that there exists in the world a painted Sister of Battle from the new range that can be paired. So that could exist. There you go.
Well, that's going to be the free Adepticon model. You know that, right? It's going to be a Sister of Battle.
I don't know. Keith in the chat just said that there is a character or person in the Vigilus video that looks like he has a torch that looks or a brazier that looks very similar to that.
Of course,
I'll go watch the Vigilus video again and see if I can catch that. Good call. There you go.
Interesting.
All right. But time will tell, as always with these things. I mean, the problem with this has gotten so much more complicated since they started the rumor engine, as we said, because I said, even if it was devoted, let's just assume that's a thing, right?
That could be 2 years from now.
It could, not only could it be 2 years from now, it could be
which game,
right? Which game, right? Yeah, exactly. It could be for a Underworld's crew or a yet unreleased Mordheim crew or the actual army
skirmish.
Right.
Like an AOS skirmish, which we'll talk about.
Or 3 other things we haven't thought of. You know what I mean? There's just so many homes to things now because there's so many different games floating around.
A new AOS board game, like a new Warhammer Quest base game.
Oh, yeah, there you go. Sure. I mean, Blackstone Fortress is Warhammer Quest, right? So they're going to, and I assume it's been extremely successful because it seems like it has been. So my guess is we'll get expansions for that in the same way that we got expansions for basic Warhammer Quest, right?
Right. Well, that's what I'm saying. We could always return to the AOS Warhammer Quest and get a new devoted model in there. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, sure. Yes. Absolutely. Now I follow you. Yeah, 100%. That could be a fun way for them to do a little bit of lip service to a model like that, right? Without actually needing to do anything new.
But, sure. They've done it once, but now they just do a flagellant hero.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
That'd be cool. So, I'd take a flagellant hero. That'd be cool. I always yeah, I like that idea. All right.
Yeah.
So it's not going to be, but that'd be a sweet idea. Do that, GW. Make some kind of special flagellant hero that shows up in some kind of game, just so we have the option to take some 40-point, no save, 5 wound Looney Tune. That'd be great.
He might be 6 wound. He could be really crazy.
Oh,
really
sure.
ripped.
He's tough. Nah, he's still just a normal human. So he's still 5 wounds. He would just have some kind of feel no pain save, right? He gets a free 6-up feel no pain save. There you go. Done and dusted. 40 points.
Sounds about
Nailed
right.
it. Yep. 3s and 5s. No rend. 2 damage. 4 attacks. Done. There's your hero. Wrote it. Print it, GW. Let's go. Make it happen. Okay.
And he makes nearby flagellants immune to battle shock.
It just shuts off their own ability.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh boy.
It'll get to pile in. Well, the altar already does exactly. So, if they do it again, then
just be completely duplicative. Yeah, for no reason. Sure.
Sure. What else? So we have. I had mentioned PAX and the results from PAX. We had a 3-day event with what's her face's Nurgle took top with a mixed list. We'll talk about that probably when we talk about the Nurgle stuff. Other things of note this last weekend.
Mm-hmm.
We had a where did it go? It was
Australian Masters.
Yeah, we had an Australian Masters and we had the New Zealand Masters. For the Australian Masters,
are those 2 separate things?
They are.
Wow.
I mean, I know you did they're all in the same part of the world, Vince. They all look alike.
It's all just down there.
Sure.
Yeah, what they need to do is put them together and have an Anzac Masters.
Yeah. This is South Pacific Masters.
Indeed. For the Australian Masters, David Kerr took it with Stormcast Eternals. It was a Anvils of Heldenhammer list, interestingly enough.
Nice.
Yep. I mean, that said, like, it was an Anvil of Heldenhammers list that was a like predominantly like sacrosanct with some ballistas. So doing like the chain shooting with ballistas.
Sure.
I would assume.
Did
Or
he
the
have,
evocators.
Did he have Gavi in there or not?
No, you can't have Gavi for
that's hammers.
Anvils.
Sorry,
right.
thank you.
Yeah. So then we had a corn list. Corn, at Gore Pilgrims, and then a Sylvaneth Winterleaf. So,
nice. See what like the Australians continue to lead the way on interesting lists. Like I live in the wrong country here. Clearly, I need to live in Australia. They are playing a totally different type of Warhammer down there, and it's my style of Warhammer. They are taking
I just want to go win their event.
You're out of your mind. You're gonna lose so bad because what I love about it is like I love that these are our innovators. So I love. By the way, Anvils was another one that I really want to see people play. We didn't talk about it last week, but Anvils is another one that I think has real gas in the tank. So, anyways, I'm thrilled to see that an Anvils list was out there. There you go.
Indeed. And then for the New Zealand Masters, first place was a Daughters of Cain list and a standard. Say what?
Was it piloted by a sheep?
Sean Tubman,
who I don't believe.
Is a sheep? No. And he just took it was a Slaughter Troop Hagnar.
Okay, right on. Bringing out the Slaughter Troop. I'm a fan. Yes.
Yep. Slaughter Troop Hagnar with Marathi. James Page came in second with a Legion of Sacrament. And it looks like a pretty standard Archon list. Mortis Engine, Lords of Sacrament, Battalion, Spell Portal, whole deal. Some Grimghast, all the normal expected players. And then Lee Wilmot in third with Sylvaneth, and we again have a Winterleaf Wargrove.
Nice.
So
I like seeing all this Winterleaf. That's good. I think there's lots of interesting. I think multiple of the Sylvaneth mega battalions are competitive right now, and I like to see people pushing these around to see which one's actually going to rise to the top. Now that we've gotten past the age of like when the initial change when Sylvaneth were just like, this is the thing, we're gonna do this Dreadwood thing, it's gonna be this Alpha Strike and that's it, right? So I like,
and it wasn't, and like Dreadwood hasn't won any events.
Well, because alphas don't win,
right.
I understand alphas will always, I'm not saying ever, I'm saying on balance they don't win.
Like you're saying events, they won't 5.
They wouldn't win events. Yeah, they don't 5-game events.
Right.
That's exactly.
They may win games, but they're gonna lose.
You'll win like 3 or 4 games if you're a good player with a good alpha list. The problem is winning. The delta with a strong alpha list between winning like 4 and 5 is a pretty big gulf. You got to Evel Knievel that thing,
right?
Because you're gonna run up against somebody who just can properly blunt your alpha strike, and then you are just dead. Right. In many cases, it's not always the case, and it's not. I'm not saying they've never won a tournament. There are examples of alpha strikes winning tournaments. I am saying that if you're trying to get 5 games, it's probably not the best tactic. That's all I'm saying.
Right. Yep. You're gambling in the truest sense.
Yeah. It really is. Yes. It banks a lot on a strategy that once it blows up, you have nothing to fall back to often. Like if it's a true alpha list. Now there are some that can kind of ride the line, and that's a different story. So there you go. Sure. By the way, I'm speaking about in AOS here. So like somebody like I know you're referencing 40K. I'm not speaking. 40K has a completely different dynamic, like in as far as what can be done and what it means to alpha and all that sort of stuff. I mean, only with AOS.
No, yeah, in AOS, I mean, alphaing is a good way to get second place in an event, right, Gary Percival?
Ouch, Mr. Alpha Strike, yeah. Although he did win.
Yeah, he did. He
Proof
took
that if
Stormcast.
Proof that a broken clock can be right twice a day. Way to go, Gary.
No, related to that, not necessarily to Gary, although this is somewhat connected. Speaking of Masters events, the UK Masters pack came out, and boy, was it a doozy.
I did not see this. I missed this.
Yeah, it went out, and I've had some communications with some of the people prepping for it, and it's in Akshi. Like the whole event is in Akshi.
Okay. Like in the fire, in the realm of fire.
Yep.
Okay.
And like everybody gets the default like command ability and default spell, and then every round they get one additional spell that's predetermined.
Okay.
And they get one additional, and they get one of the traits for the realm of fire.
Okay.
And the way the way the pack is written, like there's a number of matchups or there's a number of lineups that are just non-starters. Stormcaster are going to really have a really hard time. Like there's just anyways, I don't want to get into it, but because like total commitments there until like a lot of movement shenanigans and a lot of standard stuff are gonna like not gonna work on that in those lists. And so I know that I know a number of the people that are attending the UK Masters have talked about having to go back to the planning board with their armies as they're trying to figure out how to do this. So
it's interesting. I have some thoughts on that, Paul, but I'll hold for a second. Paul, what are your thoughts on that? On a you just using the normal rules, but it does greatly change the state of play.
I mean, it's kind of doing similar sorts of things that a lot of narrative events do, right? Like it's a narrative in a very light touch sort of way.
Sure.
I think what I like is that it's forcing players to think outside the box. It's saying, your normal list you run might not work correctly. So you need to look at the parameters and you need to adjust accordingly.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to force, I think, apart from those players whose lists are going to be fine anyway, it's forcing players to really be at the top of their game in order.
It's forcing an artificial meta.
Right.
It's creating a new environment that where things that may have been good aren't good. Now on the neat side, so lists are due like here this week, and they basically have like a month to paint, I think, like to get their new list done for it, which I don't have a problem with. I like the fact that it forces people to have to crack the code again. Players that are at the top of their game, everybody has a new formula for what the layout's going to be, scenarios and everything, and to see what people crack the code with, either as the meta or the counter meta lists.
How many? Sorry. I mean, he still didn't get it, folks. We all heard that, right? That he screwed it up even on the last time. But I'm just gonna. We're gonna just move on and pretend like we all know. We all understood it. But at any rate, no, I agree. I think it's an interesting take because I think it does use the rules in an interesting way to force people to reconsider and play differently. I do like the idea of artificially creating a meta to test people at a certain level. You have to be able to read this pack, understand what the implications are, and respond accordingly. I think that is a pretty good test of both your list building, which I would argue if you're going to call yourself the master, then that is part of your skill set you should have, as well as your ability to then capitalize on those things during the game, right?
Unless said master goes to other people to help them build their list.
That was just fine. There's no problem with that. I mean, of course, everybody's going to crowdsource. We all do.
Sure. Yep.
There's nothing wrong with that. You still have to show up and play your games.
Sure. No, that's true. And you may not have a lot of practice with your list. Right.
So I think that's actually a really interesting thing that can help turn stuff on its head. I think you want to be careful with that. You don't want, I suppose I don't want every event to just devolve into wildly, divergent metas because of stuff like that. But that being said, as an occasional thing, I think that sounds actually quite a good test, right? And an interesting way to keep things fresh and different from whatever the current sort of, we'll call it play atmosphere is. Right?
Sure.
Okay. No, cool. All right. What else we got?
That was events. We had a lot of events. We had Blackstone Fortress for Kill Team. You want to talk about that, Vince?
Yeah, dude. They released the Kill Team rules. I know this is an AOS show mainly, but I'm fast. We all love Kill Team. And so your Blackstone Fortress dudes and gals can now be played in Kill Team, which is pretty sweet. So they've got all the data cards and stuff out there. You can go grab them, and they, the roles are more or less what you would expect for them, where they're specialisms, and I think it's super sweet. So I didn't get to look at the non-heroes yet, so I don't know if any of that stuff is usable. I didn't get to read deep enough, but I think that I love the little robot defenders that show up in Blackstone. I think those guys look cool. So
well, I wasn't actually going to do Blackstone, but like my kids are like, we've been doing Silver Tower around this house in the last week at a breakneck pace, and we'll probably move on to Hammer Hall next and go through all that because I have young kids and they like playing games, and so I think that doing the 40K Blackstone again, I wasn't going to buy it, but like that stuff's been successful, so it'll be a nice upgrade because it's a little bit more complex than the AOS version.
Nice. Yeah, it is quite complex. It's my only pushback on it. We'll talk about complexity in a minute. All right, what else we got?
Do you want to use that as your transition?
We might as well. We might as well. Let's just transition. So today, an article got shared around quite a bit by the Twitterati of the Warhammer Twitterati, and was a discussion. It was basically written from the point of view of a professor who's a magic enthusiast, and he was talking in response to a podcast or video talking about sort of the attention Wizards pays to pro players, and he sort of sketches out a history and talks about the history of competitive Magic and what Wizards has decided to focus on and stuff like that.
His interpretation of why things are the way they are.
Yeah. And sort of the moves that Wizards has made or not, of who they care about and what's their target audience and how do they make cards and cater to their audiences and so on and so forth. It's I don't want to devolve into the minutia of arguing over the history of the MTG article, because that's not really what we're here to talk about. Right. I don't think he nailed every historical point exactly, but I don't think that really matters. I think that in the end, the article was really interesting because it did make several points cogent, and it's worth a read. I'll link the article down in the description.
Yeah. It's on for those that follow me on Twitter, like I posted it, and there's been a very active discussion on my page today about it.
Yeah, you're not joking about that. Like every time I look down at my phone, it was like 20 new, notifications or whatever.
And I know, and I was like, oops, I didn't realize that when I woke up this morning and posted this from Ming that it was going to do this.
Yeah, and shout out to Ming who found that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ming. It was a really good read because I think that the relevant elements to me that I think we would all do well to understand and internalize are, one, that complexity is the enemy, right? Almost universally. And there's some discussion about this. Like, some people say, well, like, I know I was talking to LLV a little, and he said, well, complexity for complexity's sake is the bad thing. And I said, yeah, I mean, I agree in principle. Of course, that's true. But you can quickly come to a point where it doesn't matter. Like, you can have the best rule in the world. It can be the most tightly written, perfectly balanced thing. But if it's incredible and do a good thing within the scope of the game for extremely competitive people who know how to manipulate and use it, but it can just be too complex and it just should be gotten rid of, right? And in my estimation, AOS is like, currently after second edition, we are at the borderline. Like, I do not want to see AOS get any more complicated. It is literally riding the edge. I think we're at a good place right now. I don't think it's anywhere bad. I think we're safely on the side of the line that is still good. We are in good territory, population us, but a push, in the wrong direction it could easily get us there.
I mean, I hear that. What I would say is, and I note this in the thread, but like, I recognize, like, when I was teaching my kids, AOS when AOS 2 dropped. And my 8-year-olds, I decided to continue teaching them AOS 1 because the complexity jump on command points from, like, you have one ability, one of your guys has one ability that they can use once per turn in your hero phase. It went from that to now you have a resource and you can activate it 9 different ways from like 6 different models, and you can do like all this like in any phase.
Sure.
Like the complexity for my kids, like it made it incomprehensible, like initially, for how they like would do that and plan for it.
Sure.
And so like I wonder what it bumped up the minimum play experience from to
Well, I
on
think
the
that
game.
yeah, and part of that changes the way that I think you as a person who's introducing Warhammer to a new person. I think it's okay to just not use some rules, right? Like I would never use realm stuff if I was introducing someone to Warhammer, right? And so on and so forth. And I think that one of the strengths is of AOS 2.0 is that they have kept things fairly modular. And so it is easy to remove those things, which I think is a strength because you can then control the complexity setting. That's a very strong overall design because they haven't tightly integrated everything, which I like. Paul, what are your thoughts? You did you get a chance to look it over, or what are your thoughts on complexity? Pick up and run with it however you like.
Yeah, I mean, I did take a quick skim through the article. It was very long, and I didn't have a lot of time to look at it once I actually got my hands on it, which was fairly later on this evening. So, but thoughts on complexity in general. What I will say is that a friend of mine, who was the guy that got me into Warhammer initially, at, shall we call it the Great Schism when Age of Sigmar came out, he went in the Kings of War direction. And he was still like, he'd still play a pickup game of Age of Sigmar here and there.
Sure.
You know, even though like Kings of War was his thing, right? And that's fine. However, since AOS 2 dropped, he's like, I want no part of this. There is no way that I can get my head around this rule set and all of the different war scrolls and all of the different layers of complexity as like a secondary game. Like not his primary thing. And he's like, I don't even want to touch it. So, and this is like, you know, he's not just like any Kings of War player. He's like going to like Kings of War Masters this year. So, I think complexity can be a real issue. I think the way they've done complexity in Age of Sigmar has some real ups and downs to it. So they like the core rules themselves compared to 8th edition got pared way down in complexity. But that just like kicked the door open for design space on every other model in the game having very high levels of complexity.
Sure.
And like there's no 2 war scrolls in Age of Sigmar that are the same. And many of them are like not even like there's some that are like kind of similar, but there's no 2 that are the same. Everything has unique abilities, and then you add allegiance abilities, spells, spell lores, realms, realm rules, 18 different scenarios, all of that on top. And I think it can be overwhelming for some people, and it can be overwhelming for some new players. But I think the modular sort of design for it, you know, I think it makes it so that, you know, when you're introducing the game to a new player, you can introduce Age of Sigmar now and just say, we're not going to worry about command points for this particular intro game. You're going to have your general. Your general can use his command ability once a turn. We'll talk about command points in a few games down the road.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, in my group, we didn't use like artifacts or spells for a long time because my players are just not that kind of group, and they didn't care to use them, right? So for a long time after those were introduced in the original GHB, we never used them. Like we eased into that slowly, right? Yeah.
And there's no reason that you can't peel those things out, though they don't break the game by taking those elements out.
Yeah, and again, credit to them when they made the list of like things you have to have, things we think you should have, things that are optional. The things you have to have are like the basic rules in the war scrolls, right? Like that's kind of what that was like the cut. And you can play a game with that and the game will function sensibly, right? Like it doesn't, all the rest of this stuff doesn't need to be on there for the game to work, which I will attest like to my grave as a strength and actually a really smart element of design.
Yeah, I think the modularity is absolutely brilliant in the design. And it just makes it so that you can play whatever level of complexity that you really want to, which is lacking in some games.
Sure. I feel the need to read a quote on air that came from somebody in the comments. This is an answer to somebody who I don't think is watching the show right now, but if they go back and watch it later, or at least I can quote it. I'm going to go ahead and quote Autumn Lotus from our comments right now, which says, but it also made formerly unusable heroes into assets. Exalted Deathbringers are a useful tool now as a command ability as well as a murder boy. I agree with you, Autumn. And that is so deeply ironic, you have no idea. But at any rate, I've never discussed a model more deeply than an Exalted Deathbringer this very day. So at any rate, no, I think the other really cogent point from the article is he talks a lot about emotional resonance, right? That one of the things that they clued into was that sort of Wizards is clued into is like people want characters to connect to and people want chances to express their love of a thing. Like he points out like buying Funko Pops and you know, play mats and whatever. And you know, like I feel like that's not wrong. Okay. You know, my point is that like there is some like we get to naturally express it automatically, right? By simply because we're buying more than a deck of cards, more than a commitment when we choose an army, right? You buy a model, you cut the model, you put together the model, you paint the model, you're already making an investment and expressing something about yourself by making that commitment, right? So I think that emotional resonance is something that GW has been really moving toward a lot in how they develop. You see a lot more use of like these in the narrative, these stories, when you look at how they're guiding everything through like what happened with Malign Portents in that story, in having special characters play a role and having these things. I want to see that continue to build, right? I want to see them continue to expand the story to give us people to latch onto. You look at novels that have come out that have had characters people really latched onto. Bringing Gotrek back and stuff like that, and having a really great voice actor voice him in the novel. So I very much like all of that. The other thing that clicked was they talked about like turning the Pro Tour into, and I'm so far removed from all this, but they talked about turning the Pro Tour into sort of like an experience thing where it's like the Magic weekend or whatever, right? Like the Magic convention fest thing. And immediately in my head, I was like, well, this is a place where GW clicked onto this a while ago, right? Because they're like, it's Warhammer Fest and it's these games day weekends and it's this kind of stuff where it's like, yeah, there's a tournament going on probably, right? Or something, or a set of games.
There's some type of gaming event, but that's not the point.
Right. We're going to show you new models and you're going to be able to meet designers and you're going to, you know, do 100 other things. Right. So I think that's, and I love that. Like Warhammer Fest was a great time. I'll go again next year. As soon as they set up a date, publish your dates farther in advance, GW. Some of us have to travel internationally. Maybe you could say the date of your biggest event of the whole year some distance in advance. I know what date like Adepticon is in 2020. Okay. Like I'm just throwing this out here, guys. Come on. I mean, I know you got the place booked. Publish the date.
But there is also one more thing that I'd like to add that I think would really benefit Games Workshop to do. Press passes for YouTubers.
Press pass? You want a press pass for Warhammer Fest? That's what's keeping you out? Like that.
I mean, if I had a press pass, like an excuse.
Sure.
That's what it is.
Yeah, the badge is like 20 pounds or something ridiculous. Like it's not expensive. That's the thing. Never mind the international flight and hotel. It's it's that last 20 pounds. The last mile really gets you.
I can convince my wife to go to England. I cannot convince my wife to let me do anything Warhammer related while we're there.
See, you got to work on that. You should all have her talk to. Seriously, put her in touch with my wife. We had a very fun time. She enjoyed herself while we were doing the Warhammer stuff.
Like if I had sufficient lead on Warhammer Fest, I think I could convince my wife to head over. But like I have to have like a 9-month lead, and that'll never happen from GW.
I
Sure.
mean, I plan my Disney vacations a year in advance. I mean,
right? Like,
yes, yeah, that's my point. Like, I don't even have a family, and you know, it's still, I need to plan this travel in advance. But anyways, neither here nor there. It's a good article. Check it out. I think it has, like I said, I think it's worth it for the insights that it portrays. I don't I don't want to get into the like competitive bad casual
Sure.
good. I don't think that's really what it's trying to say. I think that, like, but I see how you can also read it that way. I think the point that I took from it was it's best to develop your game for the broadest audience possible and make sure that as
Right.
many people as possible can have fun, and that people, if people are emotionally connected to your game and the game is not too complex, if it's been written to a place where people can pick it up easily and play in the way they want to have their fun, your game will be more successful.
Right.
That's how
and
I read
like, and the element that I appreciated about it that I caught some flack for was that I feel that like I am a competitive gamer, but I don't think that competitive play needs to be at the center of our hobby. Does that make sense? So like I want us to have a place, but I don't think that like the central expression of what Warhammer is competitive play. That's why I'm hesitant on the push for this like hyper formalized competitive stuff, is because I could see that trying to be pushed into the center of the hobby, and I know I don't want to push other people out, and that's what it will do.
You want it to be a planet, not the sun.
Right.
It can be a big planet, right? But it's not the sun. Everything doesn't orbit around it.
Right.
But it has a firm and established place in the solar system. Right.
Yep.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yep, totally agree.
All right. Like I said, I will link the article down below. Check it out if you're looking for some reading. It's a heck of a piece. Like, boy, the dude wrote a lot. It's a lot of words.
He's clearly
an English professor. Yes,
an English professor.
Indeed.
Yeah. For events.
How's that dissertation going, Tom?
That's what I've been working on the last couple weeks. So,
sure.
South Coast.
What's our page count, Tom?
I don't want to talk about it. South Coast GT is the 26th to 28th of April. Tickets are going to go on sale February 2nd.
Yes, Dan posted up a nice message today on Twitter where he told everybody the dates and said he's not dead. It was good to hear from him. He's still around. All right. Good. Nice guy.
Pretty fantastic.
Not dead. No, I think that obviously probably Dan won't be at Adepticon this year, which is a shame. This will be the first year in several years that he hasn't been over here. So I'll miss seeing him, but I hope to catch him at some event when I'm over at the UK this next year. So
indeed,
nice guy. I like hanging out with him. Real nice guy.
Yeah, definitely. As well, and then a final piece of news. Apparently, Skirmish showed up at the end of White Dwarf, for next month. So that's happening. So we're finally maybe going to get to see what Bottle's been working on for the last year.
Apparently, yeah. We'll see, man.
So
I just have a little quick piece of news as well. Just hyping local events.
Yes.
We actually have a GT coming up in February. I believe it's the first weekend of February.
Okay.
In Warwick, Rhode Island, called Captain Con. So we're hoping to hype that up, get it bigger, grow that one out. I think last year was its first year with AOS, and it was like a dozen or so people. But just to kind of put a pin on that, like Triumph's first year was, I believe, about the same. Their second year was in the 30s or 40s, and they have reserved tables for 100 people for next year. So,
there you go. On that same note, the sign up for Triumph is also live. It's in June, as Martin pointed out in the comments. Triumph is June 8th through the 10th, and the website's live. I will link that down below too, and I'll link the Captain Con AOS. So if you're up in the Northeast, all the tournaments you want, non-Northeast people, I don't know what to tell you. Send me your info. We'll spruik it.
Yeah, I'm interested to see where the Northeast scene goes. One of the bigger 40K players that is from Massachusetts has recently flipped over to AOS.
Yeah, because AOS is amazing.
Yeah, and 40K is apparently toxic and terrible. So
we're not gonna start that old war up again. It's fine. Everybody can be happy together. Play what you like.
Everybody can be happy together. It's true. All I'm saying is the AOS side of the room, we're having a great time.
We are all enjoying ourselves, and we welcome anybody to come in. But you play what makes you happy. There's nothing wrong with Space Marines, other than everything. But there's nothing wrong with the other races that aren't Space Marines.
Hey, Vince, what was your most recent painting project that you just finished?
This thing that I just finished. It was a Space Marine. He was a lot of fun to paint.
I know. That's what I was.
Yeah. He's over there in the case now. There's a lot of
Yeah,
fun.
I think there's also in Massachusetts, like Boston area. Am I cutting out on you?
Yeah, you're back now. You're fine.
Okay. Yeah, I believe there's going to be another one coming up in the general Boston-ish area in Massachusetts sometime next year as well. I'll try and get you guys the info for that.
Okay. Anybody who wants to, like, if you've got events and you want us to spruik them, as usual, just hit either Tom or I up on Twitter, and we will make sure we either spruik it on the show, put out links, boost the signal any way we can. Like, anything we can do to help grow your events, you should reach out to us. We want to help you. So there you go. All right.
And if you sent us something and we have not responded to it, or it's been a long time, send us something again. We've probably forgotten.
It's going to happen. Like, sorry, but, you know.
Yep.
Life.
It happens. Yep.
I don't know what else to tell you. Okay. All right. We know you love Space Wolves, Rob. That's fine. Okay. So, any other news? Or are we at the end of our news?
We're at the end of our news.
All right.
Oh, we're only like 45 minutes in. That's not bad.
No, it's pretty good. We're cruising right along. All right. So, pick of the week. Paul, what would you like to share with everybody, buddy?
You know, I'm going to pick something that is kind of surprising that I randomly kind of pulled up yesterday.
Okay.
I want to give a shout out to 2 Plus Tough. I know he's been mentioned on here many times before. I'm usually not really a fluff guy. I don't really pay that much attention to the stories and all of that. Something caught my eye in my subscription feed on YouTube. Went over to his channel, checked it out, and realized that he has been doing like tons and tons and tons of videos that are like all over the board.
Oh, yeah.
So you can, at this point, it's like you can pretty much just like pick a thing that you want to know more about and go see a video that's like, 15 or 20 minutes on that one particular character, faction, topic, whatever it is. Like he did like a whole series on like Nurgle lore, which was very cool. And I saw that there was like 5 or 6 videos on like Tamerkin that I need to go look at now too.
He makes an incredible amount of content. Like I have to say, if you're not a follower of 2 Plus and you're at all interested in the lore, or just like, he also just does some nice hangout and paint and chats and stuff like that, where he just kind of talks through news and stuff of the day while he's working the While You're Reforging series. He is just a super nice dude who is enthusiastic for the hobby. And if you're at all interested in more or less anything Age of Sigmar related, I don't know why you wouldn't be sub to him. That would be my question. Like you've made a wrong choice. Go back, remake it, sub up.
Yeah, and if you're somebody like me that is not really into the fluff and the story, the lore, whatever you want to call it, but you'd like to know just a little bit, he gives you nice little bite-sized chunks of the backstory of whatever it is. And it's pulling from, like whatever's in the core book, whatever in the battle tome, and various different novels, like wherever that particular thing happens to have popped up, which is really cool.
Yeah, I will link his channel down below. Hot pick. I like it. Tom, what do you got?
Yeah, so I had some of the boys from Texas reach out to me. And there is a new podcast that is rocking. James Sutherland and crew are doing a podcast called The Ever Chosen. And it's a like a competitive / hobby podcast. And they just finished up the Christmas special, and I would encourage you all to check it out.
Awesome.
Nice.
I have the link and I will share. Good pick. I dig it. By the way, have you seen the Rage of Sigmar beef with the Dwellers Below?
I have.
It's a lot of fun, where they're directly now stealing the show titles of the Dwellers Below for their own podcasts. I love you, Jacob. All right, so
I was supposed to say is I love you, Jacob.
Yeah, you're hilarious. Anyways, my pick will be for our buddy, the Terrain Tutor. And he has been working on an awesome terrain piece that which is always I love this guy's videos, even though I don't like terrain. I like he's got so many clever ideas to build everything. I just steal his ideas and use them on bases. But I mean, it's basically the same thing. But he's been working on this like demonic altar piece. And his most recent video on it is about doing really cool resin effects because he's working on this big like skull with blood around it.
Sure.
And people have frequently asked me about a very common question I get is about working with like resin and water and realistic water, and especially how to do blood and bubbles and stuff like that. Okay, well, this kind of has a whole bunch of different stuff in it. So if you're at all interested in that, again, all these things are perfectly applicable to bases. I would say they'll work best on like larger bases, but for your centerpiece models, it's this is a good way to go. So I'll link that down below. It's really, really cool, the effect he achieves. So would recommend. Check it out. Okay. All right. So, gentlemen, let's turn to some hobby time. What's on your tables? Paul, what are you working on, buddy?
Well, I'm sort of in between Nurgle projects at the moment. I basically have all of my Nurgle models painted at this point. And I'm currently working on selling off my Stormcast to reinforce my Nurgle. So while that waits, I am revisiting all of my Free Guild troops and fixing the old paint jobs, bringing some of them back up to a higher level, just kind of giving some touch-ups, going through, doing rebasing on stuff that was on squares or stuff that is now on the wrong size base. So yeah, I mean, generally the tedious process of going through Free Guild, and of course painting up the last of like my unpainted models, like the stuff that's still either gray or just primered, is in there too. So yeah.
So what are you going to have when you're done with this Free People reforging project? Like what points wise, what do you got?
Oh, Jesus, I don't even know. Like, just Free Guild, I want to say I'm probably in the neighborhood of like 4,000 points.
Okay, so that's solid.
Like, just Pantaloon Boys. Like, I'm not even counting, like, allies.
Sure, supplementary stuff, Luminarcs and cannons or mortars.
There's a whole other shelf of those.
Yeah, rocket batteries. Sure. No, that's solid. That's good. That's a good sized force. I like it. And so you've been spending a lot of times getting to know cod pieces, pantaloons, vam braces, other obscure names.
I've got to say, it was an odd experience. I did spend one afternoon going through, I think it was all of my great swords, and touching up all of their cod pieces like in assembly line fashion, and that was just a little weird.
Sure. I can see that. Absolutely.
Need to make it a little bit more shiny right here.
Well, you've got to
highlight it right. You got to make it really pop out there.
It's very important. So nice. So, and then do you have plans to return to your Nurgle? Like, are you going back there? Is there more stuff you still want to add?
Oh yeah. I am currently rebuilding the war chest, so to speak.
Gotcha.
I'm getting rid of my Stormcast to reinforce my Nurgle. I've got a lot of stuff that I want to buy, which, we'll be talking about in the main segment this evening.
Excellent. All right. Well, I look forward to it.
Yeah. So there's a lot of stuff that I want to buy, but I mean, I've got like 90 Plague Bearers painted and 25 Blight Kings painted and all of the heroes and actually, I'm back. Let me reel that back in. I don't have an Epidemius because he's terrible.
Do you have a Slavity Biopiper?
Hell yeah, I do.
All right.
He's terrible in AOS.
Sure. No, that's fine.
Awesome
He is an awesome model. He's worthwhile pickup just because he's so cool. All right.
Yeah. What I actually really want to do is the Spoilpox Scrivener is on a 32 mil or a 40 mil base. Okay. I want to get another another set of the Heralds, put them all on the 32 mil bases, like the
regular Herald.
No, like all of the rest of the Plague Bearers, and use the Heralds as the command.
Oh, okay. Oh,
sure. Yeah, that'd be nice.
Sure, why not?
Because nobody is using sloppity bile pipers or spoil proc scriveners in AOS. So.
Right.
Yep, it's true.
For now,
You're not wrong.
but times may change. You never know.
They may. They may get rules that don't suck eventually.
Or they could go down in points enough to where you'd be like, all right, but maybe I'll give it a shot. Who knows? The world is crazy. Maybe both. Maybe both could happen.
Maybe.
It's hard to predict. Tom, what's on your table, bud? Are you still in the middle of terrain, or have you painted an actual model anytime?
No, I'm in my happy place. I'm painting terrain. It's beautiful. I love it. Like I have this little piece, and then I had a modified like Aquila shrine that I did a little bit of work conversion stuff too. And then I'll be done with the like watching. Like I went way over. Like this is going to be where my graveyard is the best painted graveyard in Warhammer. This is going to be the best painted set of ruins in Warhammer.
First of all, it's not the best painted graveyard. I've seen better painted graveyards, but nonetheless, I did take the meeting.
I'm pretty sure
spent a lot of time on it.
Shut your mouth. It's the best.
Okay. All right.
Whatever your kids tell you.
Bloop. You can stay home.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I'm just doing way too many steps on this terrain, and I'm okay with that. Like, rather than like base coating, dry brushing, calling it a day or whatever, like I'm doing a little bit more work on these. So I just want to get my first round of like the base color on all this stuff done, and then I'll probably switch to doing my back to AOS. So
nothing wrong with that. Look, you get terrain done. It's terrain for all your tables for as long as you want it. It's not a bad thing to ever have. So I may.
Well, I'm actually not going to finish the terrain. Like I'm not finishing it. Like to be clear, I'm just doing the first step on it, which is getting like the base of the like most of the walls and stuff done, and then I'll go back later and detail all of it.
That doesn't mean you can't set it up on your table and use it.
Right.
Yeah. Don't you have like an entire unpainted Chaos Fortress too?
Not anymore.
Was it painted or sold?
Neither. Yes. You go ahead.
I gave that to Steve Herner.
Ah, there you go.
So that's one of his projects right now for a future Holy Wars table. So
sweet.
So since this is going to end up probably being like some kind of like Chaos Fortress, but it'll be probably corn or something like that, right? Because it's like a very brass fortress.
Well,
I don't know what his plans are for it.
There may be 2 tables. Like, let me say that.
You have a lot of fortress there. I don't know what it'll end up being. That's all Steve.
Right.
So whatever it'll be, I told Steve straight out, like I can't be outdone by my co-host here. I was like, look, whenever you get that done, come to me because we're gonna do a decadent town that's been conquered by Slanesh. That's what I want. I want just like a town that is given in to like the party to end all parties. Participation is mandatory. All right. So
drugs and rock and roll everywhere.
Right.
Are you painting a table for him? Is that what I just heard?
No, it's not what I said. You didn't paint the stuff. That's not what I said.
Got it.
Yeah. All right. So for myself, I'm working on something fun now. I am working on this. So this is the Queen of Ecstasy or whatever from Creature Caster. And there's a lot of her not on her because I didn't like all the extra parts. She had a lot of like bits and bobbles and stuff hanging down. And I like her more simple and in a T shape. So there you go. She's a lot of fun. Nice. She's coming along. She'll be done this weekend, hopefully. Probably another like 30, 40 hours, which I can put in by the end of Sunday. And we should be good to go.
Are you going to use her for anything?
Yeah. What do you mean? Define user for anything? Yes, sure. She'll be an exalted keeper of secrets. I mean, I'm sure.
Sure. No, I was asking more about like, are you going to use her for any competitions?
Yes, but not in the way you're thinking, probably. That's my mysterious answer to that, and all I can say at the moment. So there you go. But at any rate, I'm excited about her. Hopefully I'm going to get a chance to teach a couple classes here in 2019 that deal with painting large monsters or something. So we'll see how it works. I've got of the 2019 courses I'm teaching with CK Studios, we'll do plenty of the sort of night stuff, but we'll do some other classes too. So
yeah,
and we're putting together go ahead, Paul.
With that particular model, you'll have an excellent opportunity to do an entire class on painting nipples.
It's a much simpler process than one would think. It doesn't take that long. The armor on her is really what takes forever. That being said, there will also be a new product review incoming for this right here. Oh, this little thing is the sweetest thing. This is Molotov, the original. This is liquid chrome. And this is the 30 mil refill for their pens. I guess they make pens that are meant to paint with this ink. It's an alcohol-based ink, chrome ink, and it is the most amazing, like, high shine metal. So I was mixing it with some Vallejo metal color, which has been by the only metal I'll use. But I was never happy with the highlight. The highlight never got reflective enough when I wanted that true chrome, that like mirror finish, right? And this produces that mirror. I mean, it's not going to show through. You can't tell on her. You can't tell on this. But like, this is my little thing I was using to like paint daub it.
Yeah.
Do you see right here? Like, let me lock on me. This is going to be very difficult to see, and I'm sorry, but I'll do my best here. Okay. Do you see this little space right here where I was daubing off the edge of the paint? You see how that's reflecting the screen right now? Like, that's literally casting a mirror reflection. That's how sharp that is. Okay. It paints mirrors. It's amazing. So anyway, I'll do a full product review on it and show it in action. I was trying to, I've had like a Necron kill team for a while, just sitting in a bag, kind of waiting for it. I didn't know what I wanted to do with them. Hello, Terminators. So that's happening. Guys are gonna look like they just came fresh out of the factory, baby. Bring on that liquid steel. So at any rate, well, that'll probably happen here soonish. Okay. So, gentlemen, shall we turn?
What's the retail on that? Just curious.
Oh, the liquid chrome stuff?
Yeah.
I got the 30 mil bottle there for like, I don't know, $8 or $10, maybe something like that.
Oh, that's nothing. Yeah.
I mean, like a completely reasonable price.
Sure. Yeah.
Especially since it's like, again, it's going to last you forever. You use it only for the highlights.
Highlights.
Yeah.
Right.
So, so yes, there will be some very silver robots. That's for sure. All right. Let's turn to some Nurgle. So who's ready to get gross? Okay. You are both enthusiasts. Sure. As we all know, Nurgle is not my favorite thing, but that doesn't mean we can't discuss them. I hate the models. I don't hate the rules. I like their rules quite a bit. Nurgle's had some let's call it swings and roundabouts. So right, over the last year of competitive play, we've now transitioned into AOS 2. So Paul, I just want to, you're swinging back into Nurgle pretty hard. Let's start at the 40,000 foot view, and I want to have you talk to us about like what is it that has drawn you back into Nurgle? Where do you see as the potential? That kind of thing.
Well, what I'm going to say, first of all, it's not really getting drawn back in. I've been basically playing Nurgle nonstop since the book dropped.
In many ways, Nurgle never left. It's always offered the same great diseases at economical prices. Yes, absolutely.
Absolutely. So, the big thing that drew me in was just the sheer versatility of everything they had going on. Like, once I realized what the cycle of corruption did and how that worked, I was immediately hooked as far as what the army did. I am a big fan of armies that are a toolbox. Having a lot of versatility, a lot of kind of mid-rangey kind of stuff, not necessarily committing in any one particular direction. And Nurgle, I think, does that incredibly well, especially with the cycle of contagion. So you just get individually, each of those buffs isn't like earth-shattering as an allegiance ability, but getting them basically on demand when you need them is incredibly powerful.
All right. So have you found overall, like, they're a tricky army to use. One of the things we identified originally was that they have a lot of, as I've said many times, there's a lot of tools in the toolbox, but you've only got 2 hands to hold those tools. Do you find yourself having to make, sort of hard decisions and getting pulled in different directions with your list?
What I find is that you kind of have to pick a direction and go with it. There are debuffs are available to you, and not to cross streams too much. Because, like, for example, you could run a very heavy armor debuff list, right? Like, you can run a Blight Cyst with
a Rust Fang and with
Rust Fang and Festus and Favored Poxes, and now you can put somebody down to like -4 armor. But that's like super duper redundant. Like, you don't really need that.
Also, then you run to like some ghosty boys who don't care, or an army of 6-up chicks that are all relying on their feel no pain rerollable save or whatever. Yeah,
exactly. So what I've been finding is finding the right balance between different abilities. I was running a lot of Blight Cyst over the past like 6 months or so, and I've been finding with that, like, I don't really need the Rust Fang. All of my guys have Rend. I don't really need Festus in the list because all of my guys have Rend. Well, substantially all. All of my Blight Kings. I was running a very Blight King heavy list for most of the time.
Sure.
Which, in retrospect now, I'm thinking is actually incorrect, or at least not the direction that I want to be going in the future. But that's for later on in the
discussion. No, because I agree with you actually, and so we'll like. So I was watching the comments before the show started, and someone said, "I hope it's not just 2 hours of discussion on Blight Cyst." We'll talk about it a little, but I think it's actually not. I think Blight Cyst is almost trappy. Yep. Right, it's not full on trap, but it's a little trappy.
It's a crutch.
Whereas I think I just think there are more interesting tools in the Nurgle toolbox that can be brought to bear. Tom, what about yourself, man? Where do you see Nurgle being at position wise right now? Like, I'm not asking for like a 1st, 2nd, 3rd rank in the meta. That's not what I mean. We can all look at LLV's list for that. I mean, like, from a sort of philosophical perspective, how are you seeing them?
I think it's strong. I think the magic is a trap at the end of the day. It's like Daughters of Cain. Like, you have strong casting, but if you skew that way, you'll get blanked by a Nagash list. And so like there's a lot of options and a lot of traps. And I actually think that the flexible kind of best of list right now has the most gas in the engine. Like, in lieu of having like Plague Touched or anything like that. Like, without Plague Touched, I think that a best of list is probably your best bet. I still like Blight Cyst, but
All right, so
let's 100% agree on the best of list. I think is the right way to go with Nurgle right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think their toolbox nature does lend itself to that. They have a lot of different tricks, realistically, to handle a lot of different situations. So why not lean into that, right? Why not take advantage of that thing?
And can I just put a pin real quick in how big the toolbox actually is?
Oh, sure, please. Yeah, I mean, this is an interesting thought, because obviously when we think of Nurgle, we usually just think of like the book, right? The Maggotkin of Nurgle. But of course, that is wildly understating the case. So yeah, walk this through, because this is actually an interesting point to make. Please.
Yes. So I was actually prepping for a video of my own the other day. And then you happen to kindly invite me on here to talk about Nurgle, so it's appropriate. So I started digging through, like, how many war scrolls actually fit into the Nurgle allegiance. So we have everything in the Maggotkin book.
Sure. Yep. Easy peasy.
Yeah, almost everything in Slaves to Darkness. There's a few things like the Dark Oath stuff, Slam Bow. I think a couple of other things that can't take marks. Sail can't take a mark. So substantially all of Slaves to Darkness. We have Clan Pestilence, all has the Nurgle keyword.
Mm-hmm.
We have a Forge World army, Tamerkan Horde, that all has the Nurgle keyword.
And by the way, it overlays on top of Magakin, so you just gain additional abilities above and beyond. And one of them is like a blanket -1 to run and charge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is like that minus.
There's just no reason not to do that. Like,
well,
there's no reason
units that are outside of there is some kind of limitation, right, on what can be in Tamerkan's Horde, I think.
Yep.
So unless you wanted units that weren't part of that, I haven't looked at the Tamerkan Sword thing recently, to be completely honest with everybody, but I know there's some kind of limitation on what can be Tamerkan Sword. But anyways,
and there's like a required command trait and required artifact, I think.
Sounds right. It's like the Stormcast Chambers and everything else, where it sets certain elements of your army. Yeah,
but it's really good. Let me just say that.
Yeah, and then so then we also have Archeon, who has the Nurgle keyword. So all of that stuff, that's just stuff that natively has the Nurgle keyword. I counted it up. That makes it the largest faction in Age of Sigmar.
Now, are you also counting the Beasts of Chaos? Who?
Yeah, I say now Beasts of Chaos. Yeah,
you can do a whole Pestigor army
before even counting Beasts of Chaos running their battalion and having an entire other book that now with just a battalion fits into your army.
Yep.
Right.
And I just want to give a quick shout out to, and I have to apologize because I forgot his name. One of my opponents at Du Bois GT was running the Khorne battalion with beasts.
Brastus spoilers or whatever.
Holy Jesus. Are those battalions not getting looked at close enough? They are crazy.
Yep.
They are really, really good. Khorne in particular synergizes really well. I think Nurgle, I haven't looked at that deeply yet. I think there's a little bit less synergy, but you can get a lot of really good benefits.
You can get a native +1 to hit from Beasts of Chaos. That's
the sexy thing. Is the native +1 to hit.
Yeah.
And they're very fast and alpha strikey.
Yeah.
But anyway, I guess the point really that we were getting at is your toolbox is absolutely enormous. You have more war scrolls in this faction than any other faction in Age of Sigmar, and that is including Stormcast Eternals.
Right.
Yep.
So there, and the point being, there isn't anything more or less of all the sort of broad groupings we put things into that you can't somehow grab a hold of, right? Speed, hammers, anvils, right? It's all spells, like whatever the thing you're trying to do is, you actually can get at all of it.
Mortal wounds, debuff, all of it.
Sure. Yeah.
You even get at shooting with like clawed catapults.
Yep.
Yeah, not the best shooting, but it is a thing that exists. Yes,
it exists.
If there's any weakness, it is that. But that being said,
Ungor Raiders, baby.
Sure, Ungor Raiders. Yeah, no doubt. That's actually your shooter winners right there, the Ungor Raiders. But the my argument would be, I'm interested to see if somebody goes almost like I'd love to see some kind of like Nurgle Ungor shooting list that matches with the Nurgle I can splash mortal wounds all over the place list. Right. So just like and all you're doing is just like really pressing on hyper key pieces constantly to just like anybody's special thing, any toy that they need to make their army synergy work, you just remove between just like Raiders unleashing volleys and the splash of mortal wounds. Because you can put 40 shots in the air, you only need to get 1 or 2 wounds. That's it.
Right, because the mortals that are splashing around are going to be doing
cleaning up the rest. Damage. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So I'm interested to see if anybody goes that direction, because that can all fit in there and it's cheap as dirt. Right.
Yep.
So all right. No, I agree. And it's a well stated point, because this is a deep well. So deep. This is Jim Capaldi. So let's talk about let's start with like the wheel and allegiance abilities, artifacts, all the sort of that trappings, right?
Mhm.
Now, after watching, I have a regular opponent who plays Nurgle, so I've gotten a chance. I don't play them, but I get a chance to play against them often. And what I have found is that the wheel is an actually incredibly powerful tool. Like as your sort of broad allegiance ability, I think it's super duper good. Is it the best thing that's out there in allegiance abilities? I would argue no. But is it super solid? I would certainly argue yes. What are your general thoughts? Let's start with the wheel, gentlemen. What do you think about the wheel overall?
I think it's managing the wheel well, I think is very important to playing Nurgle well. I think that's a pretty fair statement overall. It has a lot of things that you like. There are not too many spots on the wheel that are duds, which is really good. There's a couple that can be like totally devastating if they're in the right moment. But overall, I mean, it's a lot of buffs that are fair and balanced. And the thing is that you kind of get this, you get the tool when you need it if you have, the tools in your list to make it happen reliably.
Sure.
You mean a spellcasting duo?
Yes. Especially
I mean,
spellcasting Guo has Tome of 1,000 Poxes. Let me tell you the reliability that comes.
Yeah, I mean, like if you want to reliably manipulate the wheel, that's what you need. Like you're going to commit to a spellcasting Guo.
The other option is to take a Poxbringer and give him Tome of 1,000 Poxes. That's a decent way to do it too.
Yeah, I mean, I don't sure because like that the spellcasting Guo with the tome is what +2 to cast, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he's manipulating the wheel on a 5, right?
Right.
Yes.
So it becomes highly statistically likely. I would argue that even a normal Guo without, if you don't want to burn the artifact, doing it on a 6 isn't that horrible because you can often the way the wheel works. It depends on how heavy wheel manipulation is part of your strat. But I would argue that you can pretty often set yourself up in a place where you're like, I'm on a bonus that I want now. And, or like I started the turn, I moved it to something I want. It triggered an effect. I moved it to something I want for this turn. If I can move it again next turn, bonus. But if I don't, it's still going to roll into something that's going to be beneficial given what I'm going to be doing next turn. Right? Like you can often set that up on the wheel to where like if you drop the spell to manipulate it or it gets unbound. Okay.
Not usually a big deal.
Right.
I think the only thing on the wheel that I really don't like is Plague of Misery. That's the one that makes your opponent reroll battle shock tests of 1.
Oh, yeah, sure.
I feel like that one was kind of a miss, but I mean, out of 7, you have 6 good ones, so I'm not going to complain too hard.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, to me, like your obvious sort of perfect setup is if you can, you're on rampant disease. You trigger that at the start, right? You get to sort of mortal wound bomb a couple key units, and then you use the manipulation to set it to unnatural vitality, right? To basically skip the dumb heal that doesn't do anything, right? And then you have your movement you need, and like this is your dream first turn, right? You want to roll the 6. You rampant bomb at the start of the turn. You flip to unnatural vitality when you're out of unbind range. And then if you roll it next turn, great. If not, in round 2, you're going to be at +1 to wound, right?
Yep.
Not bad. So like, again, that sort of isn't a thing you can control for because you had to roll the hot 6 to start. But nonetheless, there are situations like that where you can be like, okay, a good thing happened. I would point out if you rolled the one, the burgeoning or whatever, the one that hits all the terrain features and rolls, can also be fairly effective for splashing around just a little mortal wounds at the start of the game. Not as good, but not terrible either.
And also, if you're running Grandfather's Blessing as your command trait, that makes either a 5 or a 6 a good hit for Rampant Disease because it's a beginning of the hero phase ability, so you can just order them such that you you move it to rampant
Before it
at the
triggers.
start of your hero phase and then trigger rampant disease.
Yep.
Since the multiple simultaneous things.
Yep. The multi-trigger.
Sure. So, no, I agree. And I, with all points, I've been nothing but impressed by what the wheel can do, right? By how it can switch. And if you manage to even get control of it, it gets more powerful. I think there in a 5-turn game, there may often be or 5-round game, whatever you want to say. There may often be a round or two where it's not optimal. But I think in the other 3 to 4 turns, it can be super optimal, right?
Yeah.
It can do a lot of heavy lifting. And to me, that makes it pretty worth it. Because when you really think about it, like how many armies have command abilities where it's like, basically there's a round or two out of the game where they don't really do anything, right? Even the arguably best army, okay, whatever that means, which some people say is Daughters of Cain. I mean, your blood rights table isn't exactly. You could very easily have your blood rights table do nothing in round 1.
You mean you don't re-roll ones to run, and you don't take any damage from your ward save? Your 6.
Yeah.
Your
that's
6
exactly
or 5 up ward save.
Yeah,
Okay.
because you don't get in a fight round 1, and you didn't roll any ones to run. Right? Like, that's entirely possible. I know we often fight in round 1 in this game, but I have had, believe it or not, I have had battles with my Daughters of Cain where I don't get into combat in round 1.
Weird.
It is possible. It is actually possible to play a more careful strategic game with them, as opposed to just pushing your witches forward at maximum, at full tilt, and rolling them bones, Tom.
Like things die when you do, though. You just push it, and then models get removed.
Sure. No,
you know what else dies when you do that, Tom?
What?
Friendships.
Yeah, friendship. That's right. That's a good point. At any rate, I think then when we look across the sweep of all the artifacts and command traits and stuff like that, I don't know that now with the benefit of hindsight, like when it first came out, everybody was Rustfang, and it was the most incredible thing in the world. I don't think Rustfang is necessarily bad. I think there are clear strengths in the list, right? And I think most of them were stuff that was originally identified, right?
Yeah.
I think the Rustfang is good. I think Endless Gift is good. I think Tome of 1,000 Poxes is good, right? Like all these things are fine. The Witherstaff, like all these things we talked about originally. I don't know that there are any more that have really popped up in my mind that have, been super good. But at the same time, I don't think any of them are out of bounds. Sure. You know what I mean? Like they all feel like they're pretty much in that sweet spot where there's a good number of them that are pretty darn decent. And you're going to find something in that, let's call it 4 or 5 that are amongst the list that you think fit your army. Right.
Yep.
And within the realm artifacts, there's a lot of fun, interesting ones that you can throw in that might add a little spice.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it's the realm artifacts have made it so like if your book has like 4 solid artifacts in it, then you're completely good and you can write 10 lists and have a fairly different artifact setup even if using a battalion. Right, because you integrate 1 or 2 out of the different realms there, and then bing, bang, boom, popcorn, you're good to go. Right. All right. Is there anything else that has jumped out at you that didn't originally grab your attention? Like, is there any gift or command trait that you thought was good and turned out not to be, or didn't care about but have used since then and thought, yeah, that's okay?
You want to talk about summoning right here?
Sure, man. Hit me.
Because that's kind of in that wheelhouse.
This is also related. This is all in this. All in this high level view. Yeah.
What's interesting is I find myself just summoning lots and lots of plague bearers.
Not surprising. Sure.
Yeah. But because the ability is like within 12 inches of a hero or within 12 inches of a feculent Gnarlmaw, it gives you a lot of flexibility as to where those guys can show up. I have summoned plague bearers directly onto objectives a number of times.
Just summoning off the tree or your heroes or whatever. Yeah, just always have somebody who's around. Sure.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a fun trick. I mentioned this in my video on my channel on the feculent Gnarlmaw. But there's a cool trick you can do with summoning a Gnarl Maw, is that you can basically spend 7 contagion points to give a unit run and charge. If they have
Sure.
a hero close enough by to drop the Gnarl Maw in within 7 inches of where that unit is. And I have definitely done that more than once. It is, and most opponents do not see that coming.
Nice.
They're safely out of range, and then all of a sudden you can run and charge, and you've got a unit of Blight Kings in their face that they didn't expect.
Yeah, it's definitely true. Well, Blight Kings are obviously especially brutal in this regard because they have the built-in +1 to run and +1 to charge, right? So like they're strapping on the British Knights and really going to town. So yeah, they're ready to go.
Indeed.
Although as being pointed out in the comments right now, this is also can be the heart of a thing like a drone strike or something like that, right? Or getting your Puscoils from just downtown into the enemy's face or whatever it happens to be. Yeah. Yep.
Exactly.
A lot of shenanigans to be had there. Shenanigans.
No,
I
that
agree.
tree isn't just for contagion. Let me tell you.
No, 100%.
Yeah, I mean, run and charge is the reason why you do the tree. Like, in my opinion, like the run and charge is such a big deal. It's such a big deal, especially for Nurgle.
It's funny how that tree turns Nurgle into one of the fastest armies in the game.
Yeah. It surprises people every time. If they've ever played Nurgle before, they do not see that stuff coming.
Sure.
Yeah, and I mean, like, the other aspect of that I would say that does come into play is lost my train of thought. Shit. The thing that is new that in the first review that we didn't get for the second review
is that you can set your run to a 6.
Well, I was going to say that and just the entire command ability shift.
Sure.
Yep.
Because before, what was good, like you skewed your general based on like what needed to happen for like your command ability or whatever. But now you can maybe like get that command trait on something that wasn't going to be your general previously, right? Because of the because you want maybe a particularly weird kind of corner case command trait, to augment to combo with an ability or whatever. So, yeah.
Yep.
No, I agree. It has absolutely changed the nature of the thing as we go into as we went into AOS 2, right? To have that ability.
Yeah. And the Nurgle book is really, really clearly written in such a way that you want to have multiple heroes with command abilities on the field at a time.
Yeah.
It's wonderful to be in a faction that can do that.
Yes. Yes, it is.
Yes, I agree. Well, then there's no better transition into talking about the heroes. So yet again, I mean, my good God, because of what you said at the beginning, the number of actual heroes with command abilities in this force is like,
yeah.
I mean, it's beyond massive. So when we talk about Nurgle heroes, what do we like? What do we think is solid? What do we think is a miss? Looking across the sweep of the thing, and maybe we can pick some dark horses in here too. So what do you got?
I'm going to throw a dark horse right off the top.
Oh, on the rip, going for the dark horse. All right, what do you got? Hit me.
So for a long time, I know we're going down the road of Blight Cyst again, that I know people didn't really want to talk about, but everybody was talking about how Lord of Blights is like a tax, including myself in that list. Until I started running a unit of 30 Plague Bearers in a Blight Cyst list.
Right.
That guy gets really, really good when he can throw his command ability on a unit of 30 Plague Bearers.
Right. Because they go to neg 4 shooting, neg 2 melee.
Yep.
Yeah.
They will hold your opponent up for a long, long time.
I'm going to go for a dark horse as well, although I'm not going to go for anything as silly as that. And you're gonna think I'm ridiculous, Vince, and you're probably gonna disagree with me, and I'm okay with that.
I'm ready.
I bet I'll agree with you. Go.
I think that in AOS 2.0, Glotkin has gained renewed life.
Wow, you are really swinging for the fences on this one. Okay, man, I'm ready. Hit me. I mean, obviously, he doesn't need to be your general to use his command ability.
Right. The big sin of Glotkin was always that he died to shooting. Like anybody would look at him and he'd be like, "Nah, I'm dead."
Okay.
Like, and the reality is we live in a world where shooting is just not prevalent anymore.
At the moment, it's still, let's call it underrepresented, probably. I don't know that it's gain. The challenge here is it is gaining strength. And like there are some castigators and Stormcast Ballistae who would very much like to have a word with you, fat boy.
Yeah, and that is absolutely true. But I stand by the fact that, I mean, he has he is one of the best force multipliers in the army.
Yes.
Because he projects a huge bubble of +1 attack.
Sure.
Yeah. He really turns your Nurgle force into turbo offense.
Right. And he is not too bad at hitting himself.
So I have to say, unlike the Great Unclean one, when you're running like the buff build, he's actually going to be a tank and run into things and do some damage.
And he's a double caster. So in a world where having extra spells for realm spells is valuable, he has one spell you want to cast, Fleshy Abundance, which are going to turn your Plague Bearers into like super tough, not unlike what the Lord of Lights is doing, but it's doubling their wounds. So your models are going to stick around longer, so your debuffs are going to stick around longer. And he has that extra spell that is unallocated. And so like I think that he is moving back into a place where people can rely, and he doesn't have to be the general. On top of like all of those factors, I think he is moving back into a very playable place.
Yeah, I will tell you, he's on my buy list right now.
Wow, this is a bold move from both of you. It's a bold move, Cotton. Let's see how it works out for him. No, I mean that's fine. I mean,
and you're getting him for 420, right?
Sure.
Like not a lot. Like when you talk about big meaty guys like that.
Yeah,
if you don't like him, you can smoke him. It works out.
Sure. Like, look, I'm sympathetic. I have faced him a lot. My opponent will often use, but not always use Glotkin. He does like to include him in the list. And I will say that when like a Fleshy Abundance goes off on the wrong unit and that command ability is up, it's absolutely ridiculous because, those Plague Bearers that were already impossible to kill before when they, when they get turned on. Yes. Like when suddenly they all have double the number of wounds, that's pretty annoying and pretty impossible to cut through.
And you're like, they're not going anywhere.
Yeah, they become, very difficult to shift. I'm not gonna disagree with all that. Fleshy Abundance which is, obviously Glotkin's spell. It's on a 7. It's not the easiest thing to world to cast, not the hardest. You can't give him anything special, but so he can't carry around an artifact, but he doesn't need to be your general anymore, so that's good. Yeah, he's an interesting one. I'm not sure I'd move him over into my buy list, but I get your pick. I really do. I'm just not sure that I wouldn't take a normal goo over him and just for a big, fat, tough buff wagon and call it a day.
I think he has a new lease on life is what I would say.
Sure. That's fair. What I will grant you unquestioningly is he's better than he was before. Right? Like the transition to AOS 2, whether or not he has crossed the line into takeable or like better than the Guo.
Dude, you took a Vortex Beast. Shut your mouth. He's takeable.
Dude, and I loved that Vortex Beast. But that's not what we're talking about. I love that dude. And the Vortex Beast is awesome. You shut your face. He can permanently decrease people's stats, yo. I will say that that Fleshy Abundance is a unique ability in the span of the game, right? Into how it can affect things. So, sure. That being said, if somebody came at me and was like, "I'm sorry, I can't see him over the normal buff wagon Guo," I'd be like, "Yeah, I get it." I get it.
I'm not going to disagree that like I could see somebody take that position. I'm just acknowledging that like in our original valuation, it's changed. Like the math has changed around him.
Agreed.
And I
His
want to
stock
acknowledge
has
that.
risen. And I don't know if I'm still going to go into the buy category, but it's, it's there.
I mean, he's on my buy list just because I don't own one yet.
Well, he's a great model as far as models go. I mean, he's no doubt about that. And, worst case, he can always just be a Guo. He can always just be like, this is my very special fat Guo and his two buddies who are riding around on him for no reason.
You can magnetize them easily enough.
Or you can just leave them up there because they're fun decoration, riding around on a fat boy. Do you need rules for every Nurgling on the base of every Nurgle model that has Nurglings just randomly scattered around? No, sometimes
I don't put Nurgle on my bases.
Well, you should. Sometimes Nurgle just has other people riding along with him. Nurgle's a party, and it wants to bring everybody along. So,
Nurglings on bases is how I differentiate in my Blight Kings which ones are the champion.
There you go.
That's a bad idea.
I mean, we should give honorable mention here to the Buff Wagon Guo, who I still would argue is incredibly strong in a lot of ways. For his cost, he can be relatively enduring. He's tough. If you give him something like Endless Gift, he becomes very hard to shift. He can be a great hero for your for all the scenarios that require a hero to sit on points. He can be a great guy to sit there and be very difficult to die. He's a very competent spellcaster, no doubt about that.
He's a great Grim Gas Stopper.
Sure.
He's a great thing to just shove into the face of a Grim Gas to block.
Of course, yes. They're going to have a very fun time bringing that down without their rerolls. He buffs your units and makes you even faster, which is, of course, not a bad thing at all. Like as if speed didn't kill enough in this army already. Now you're even ridiculously faster again. So, just don't expect him to kill anything. The dude hits like a feather. So, like, if you're trying to use him for offense, even buffed, he's very hard pressed to actually remove threats. But that's fine. So we should give honorable mention that I think we all identified that was a very strong build and a very strong model originally.
Surprise!
I think time tested. He has come out still being a fantastic choice. Yeah. All right, but I'm going to switch to my own dark horse here. And as somebody mentioned in the comments, he does ride a dark horse. I'm picking the Chaos Lord on Demonic Mount.
Okay? Did we call that back? Did we that's not a dark horse? We talked about that back when we talked about the book.
He's being literal, Tom.
It's a joke because he's on a dark horse, Tom. That's the pun. You see, that's how these things work, Tom.
Did you hear that thing whizzing by your head, Tom?
Yeah, next week the show is going to be on jokes. We're just going to talk about jokes. What I'll say is the Nurgle marked Chaos Lord has sort of the weakest, in my mind, bonus. He just gets a bonus wound, not near as good as the Zinchi one.
Sure.
Which ironically takes him off of 7 wounds and onto 8.
Yeah, I know, right? Absolutely gets him away from the Nurgle number. Yeah. Maybe he's a secret follower of Khorne. That's clearly what's going on there.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. I'm on to you now. But I still like the guy. The Chaos Sword on Demonic Mount I find to be an excellent piece in general for his points cost. I think that he is mobile. I think that he pairs well with the ability to run and charge off the tree. And I think when you combine him with his namesake boys, which is the Chaos Knights, which is what he wants to get paired with, right?
Yep.
And especially if you're doing any kind of other command ability shenanigans, if you have some extra command points, we've mentioned other heroes that can add +1 to all attacks. That's not that hard of a thing to fish in Nurgle. So if you're able to, say, activate both of those things in some way, where you can activate both the Chaos Lords and, say, any of the +1 attack varieties, then suddenly you have a hell of a hammer unit in a group of very cheap Chaos Knights, for basically 320 points. You've got these models that are going to run across the board at a fairly high speed, like literally run, even without trying to talk about another command point to set the run to a 6. That's a bit egregious. But even so, they're moving an average of 13. Then they get to charge, and they're going to get to reroll the charge base. And they're going to show up and make double their number of attacks on the charge with the +1 attack, or not double, I'm sorry, add +1 with another +1 to hit. So they're highly accurate damage delivery systems. And then when they show up there, they just gum up the works. right? Because in the end, they're not that much of your army, but they represent actually a quite difficult piece to remove. They're fairly mortal wound resistant base because of their shields. They're fairly resilient because they're just a bunch of 3 wound dudes on a 4-up save. Like you shove a lot of 30 wounds that just got shoved into their face, hit pretty hard, hopefully blew up a lot of stuff, and then just sits there. Right?
Neat.
Yep.
Yeah. They're a great mobile anvil that in Nurgle, because of the ability to add the extra attacks, can actually break somebody on a charge. Right.
Yeah.
And that's, I find that normally their number of attacks on the charge is not enough to remove the piece, but when you suddenly add 1 to the whole row and to all the pony kicks and everything, well, life changes.
And like, heaven forbid that you land blades.
Oh, sure. Well, I mean, if you land blades, then it's just say goodnight, Gracie. Right.
But
and
that's the point. Like, if they land blades, when they come rocking in, they're at +1 to hit, and they're mortaling on 5s with all of those attacks.
Yep, I hadn't even gotten to blades, but yes, that was gonna be my cherry on the Sunday, right? Like, I think they're solid without needing to land blades. I don't like to build around blades because, as we mentioned, like Nagash exists, right? and he just is a force to be reckoned with and can very easily shut off your spellcasting. Now,
that's a matchup that may happen.
So I don't like to ever bank on a spell that goes on a 7. Now, that being said, the fact that you can execute this little combo with a unit that is relatively cheap, like this entire package is 460 points. Right. Yep. And for a really solid, highly mobile, hard hitting, very resilient, and if blades goes off, absolute murder machine, little unit. Like, this is a power pair if I've ever seen them. Right. And so I love everything about that combo. As Dan pointed out in the chat, and I had forgotten about this, but it's an excellent point. The Doom Knight, the leader of the unit, has plus, like, his champion bonus is also +1 to hit.
Yeah,
so that guy actually triggers on
4s.
Yeah, that's very funny. I hadn't even thought about that. But yeah, so like I've been a longtime fan of Chaos Knights. I think that Chaos Knights plus that Chaos Lord on Demonic Mount, and then plus a suite of different things that could get in the mix, turns them into an absolute buzzsaw that then sits there and remains a problem for your enemy, which I love. Something that hits hard and sticks.
Yep.
Yeah, it's good.
But like so much, it's so susceptible to chaff.
Yeah, sure. At the same time, though, you do have, I mean, yes, assuming that they've bubble wrapped hard, right? Yeah. But if they haven't, if they have weak chaff or a thin line, you know, you've got the movement here to get around that chaff, right? Sure. Because you've got that reroll charge. That's not automatic, but like good bubble wrapping, certainly. Bad bubble wrapping, you're over the top.
Right?
So, yep. Okay. All right. So, Paul, any other heroes we want? What other heroes would you like to mention? There's so many. My God, there's so many.
I just want to call out my MVP in almost every game that I play, Gutrot Spume. He is outrageously good. He, you know, for the uninitiated, he lets you basically deep strike a unit of Blight Kings of any size, 6 inches from any board edge, and at least 9 inches from an enemy. And all of your Blight Kings have a built-in +1 to charge. So that 9 inches becomes an 8 on the charge. And since they're next to a hero, if you have a command point hanging around, they get to re-roll that. So if you couple Gutrot Spume in with a unit of 10 Blight Kings, which is coincidentally also 460 points, that is a hell of a big bully unit to hit your opponent's flank or hit behind your opponent if they give you room. And even if you don't get the charge off, it ends up being a big, very difficult to shift unit that is, I mean, Blight Kings are just a blender on their own. They are incredibly strong. Add on to that, like if you're in Blight Cyst, they get even better. If you can cast Blades of Putrefaction on them in a following turn, they're even better. sort of, and on and on and on. It is just, he's just so incredibly useful for that. And then the hero himself is actually a pretty decent combat hero and has a really fantastic special ability that I don't ever hear people talk about. So if he's got a model within 1 inch of him at the beginning of the combat phase, you roll a d6. On a 4-up, you pick a model that's within 1 inch of him and pick a weapon on their weapons profile, and that model cannot use that weapon. That is very useful against, say, a hero that has 1 weapon profile.
I can think of a couple of heroes I'd like to shut off their weapon profiles.
Yeah, I mean, so many heroes rely on, like, when you look at so many sort of behemoth-style monsters, right? There's often one main weapon that's doing a lot of the work. Not always. There are many where it's kind of spread out, but there are a lot where it's like, this is the thing that if it hits, it just cracks. That's the nutcracker of the profile, right?
Dragon Jaws, huh? Awesome.
Sure. That's a good example.
My favorite that's happened so far was someone made the mistake of bouncing a Tenebral Shard next to him with the Sword of Judgment. And he totally proceeded to turn off the Sword of Judgment and then kill the Tenebral Shard.
Nice.
Yeah, those 6 attacks, right? On the tails. Awesome. Yeah, those don't work anymore.
Yeah.
Kudos. That's a great use, Paul. The other thing I would add to it that just needs to be noted when we talk about this is, those Blight Kings that he brings along are going to be 8 on rolling 8s on a 9-inch charge.
Sure.
Yep.
Because he's a hero, you could use a command ability from him and give them rerollable. And so because he shows up with them, you have a hero that's deep struck with them that can actually grant them the reroll that they need.
I already said that, but okay.
Oh, well, I didn't hear you. So.
It's all right.
Right by it.
No, I agree with you. Gutrot's a good dude. I think that he's got, again, and he's not super expensive for what he's doing. He's got utility. He's killy enough. He does what he needs to do that he doesn't need to pay off in melee, right? Like, he sort of, his existence kind of pays off what he needs to do for his points. The fact that he can actually be useful in some circumstances, I rate as basically like bonus prize in the bottom of the bag, right? Like, that's great. I like bagglers, but they're not necessary. So there you go.
Yeah. And what's nice too is that if you happen to roll up with total commitment as your scenario, it doesn't, like, because of all of the other stuff in Nurgle, total commitment doesn't ruin your day.
Sure. You're not, and that's why I think Blight Cyst is too in on it, but like Gutrot and a pack of Blight Kings, I don't, right? Because you're not all in on that strat or something crazy, right? You're not trying to ambush your whole army in from off table. Yep. All right. So, do we want to talk about our old friend, the Harbinger of Decay? Tom, your old buddy, right? This was what you built your old list on. Has the Harbinger of Decay, has his stock decreased? Is he less valuable now? Does he remain the same in your eyes? What do you see him as, Tom, in this new world?
He remains the same, honestly. If anything weakens him, it's just simply because there's so many strong demons that you don't need him. But like, he can still carry the Witherstaff because he has the demon keyword, and so he has some utility that he can dip into. Like, I think he's still worth his points. I think that 160 is a little bit high when they bumped up his points.
Right.
He's pushing it at 160, but I think he's still worthwhile. He's a Rotbringer, so he can carry Rustfang if you really wanted Rustfang as well. So,
yeah,
the dude is rocking like every keyword.
Yeah, like, I think he's still a valuable addition, personally. I wouldn't put him in every army, though. Before, he was in every Nurgle army I built. Now, I think that I would have to think long and hard about what I'm doing in the army and whether I need him or not.
Yeah, you have to think about where you want to spend your command points.
Right. Especially because I have a lot more flexibility with those command points now. And so, because of his kind of passive thing that he turned on, he was a go-to. But now, because there's just so much other flexibility, I would consider not running him as my main general or even as a model. Like that could happen.
Okay.
I'm considering, experimenting with lists without him as well.
How are we feeling about the Lord of Afflictions right now? This guy was our, this was everybody's hot pick originally because he was Mr. Rustfang. Okay. How do we feel about the Lord of Afflictions now with the benefit of hindsight?
He is, I think he and the Puscoil Blight Lords got really undervalued in the initial release of the book.
Okay.
Because in order to use the command ability on the Lord of Afflictions, he had to be your general, and you really only want to use that like once or twice a game, like
Sure,
his
right.
plus 8-inch move. In a world where you can, have other units with command or other as well, and just have that as be like your opening move with a unit of Puscoils, I think he's much more valuable than he used to be. And I think he's been sort of sitting on everybody's shelf a little bit because he's hard to fit into Blight Cyst. He's hard to fit into some other lists. He kind of like lost his place. When Plague Touch Warband went away as a thing, everybody kind of shifted to Blight Cyst. Now we don't need this quick flying guy with a Rust Fang anymore. So I think he just kind of went on the shelf. But I think with Puscoil Blight Lords running like 4 of them with Lord of Afflictions, I think could be really strong.
Yeah, I mean, the key with him is he has to be your general to activate his thing, but now you still have access to everybody else. You didn't lose all the other good command abilities by doing so, right?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, he's an interesting guy. He's still costed. He's expensive to a point when you look at just like what 200-ish points get you in the game, right? But at the same time, I'm not sure that he's not worth it. To me, he's another one that's like on the line. I think that's what keeps getting him cut, right? It's hard for him to directly fit into into like a strat because the Puscoils themselves aren't part of like a strat, and they're very expensive, and they're a small number of units, and like there are a small number of models in the unit is what I mean. Like, so, and in general, like small numbered units struggle, right? So he wants to pair with a unit that isn't necessarily going to be
he wants to
as efficient.
Blight Kings, or he wants to pair with Puscoils. Like that's what that's where the pull is.
Yep.
And the problem is that if you're like either you're doing a Blight Cyst where you have a bunch of Blight Kings, or you're going to deep strike those Blight Kings and you have Gut Rot. But if you have Gut Rot, like he's out of place, like he's not in position to assist those Blight Kings. And then he doesn't do any of the roles really, really well.
Yeah, he's a really interesting guy. Like I honestly, this is the one I think I was warmer on him initially than I am now, to be completely honest. I definitely don't dislike him, but I think given the lists that are out there, when I look across the sweep of heroes, there's just other places I'd probably spend my points in most lists. But he does still have that nice advantage I stand behind of he can be a fairly resilient, independent operator.
Yes,
right. He can be a good interceptor, like an interceptor piece.
Yeah, exactly.
He's very survivable.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, decent-ish save, and he's got the extra resilience and all these kinds of things going on. So yeah.
I wonder if there's a list out there that's like these 3 kind of mobile centers of power. That's like a Blight King block with Gut Rot, a Knight block, and a
like a Puscoil block or Puscoil set.
Puscoil set, and then chaff. Like chaff and bodies.
Yeah, I don't know what you're using for your it's a lot of points. Maybe I need to look at the points to see how that all shakes out. You're not gonna have a lot of room there.
No,
you don't have a lot of room for.
You have 500 points of additional stuff. But I just wonder.
I mean, not even because the 2 Puscoil blocks plus him are more than 500.
No, they're 660.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. I just wonder, like, because you could do Marauders and you could do some things for bodies. Yeah, I don't know. I need to think about it. But I just, or if nothing else, 2 of those centers of power that we just named.
Sure. No, it's interesting. Kind of a 3 towers idea, right? Yeah.
Where you shove things where they need to go, and
yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting idea.
Yeah, I will say one of the lists I've been tossing around is using Gut Rot and 10 Blight Kings, and then a Lord of Afflictions and 4 Puscoils as like the big hammers, and then filling out the rest of the list with support.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of Nurgle has a lot of power pairs.
Yep.
Right. And so, but finding out exactly which of those power pairs are you putting together and deploying a maximum effect, I think, is the challenge. All right, let's move on to units. Let's move away from our heroes. There's plenty more. Like, God, we could spend hours just talking about heroes. I mean, this could because of said depth. But this is a show where we have to end it at some point. So let's move on to units and cover some of the various units out there. We already tangentially mentioned Chaos Knights, obviously, as part of that, and I stand behind those guys. But Paul, what's your hot take? Give some hot unit takes.
All right. Well, we've already really talked about the Puscoils too, and the Putrid Blight Kings. Like, those are all like your staples. One that I've been oddly thinking about, and I know Tom is going to like spit out his beverage when I say this.
Okay.
But I'm actually thinking of Beasts of Nurgle. And Tom paused.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I mean, I'm listening. I'll listen. I'll hear you out, man. Go ahead.
You lost me. I'm gonna go for a potty break.
So, Beasts of Nurgle are 1 for 100, right?
Yeah.
That's the ratio here. Okay.
Yeah, 1 for 100. I think they'd be better at like 80.
Uh-huh.
I'd be
think they'd be better at on the shelf, but keep going.
So what I find myself doing with Nurgle a lot is running stuff up and chaffing them up, and then retreating back out of combat to like with specifically with like Plague Bearers. I'll run up with Plague Bearers, put them 3 inches away from something, let them get charged. They'll survive. I back out the next turn.
Okay.
So now with a Beast of Nurgle, you're looking at like a comparable sort of wound profile, plus they're likely doing mortal wounds when you pull that retreat move. So you're just kind of constantly like taking the hit, backing up, taking the hit, backing up. So I feel like they may have a little bit of gas in the engine to play around with strictly as a chaff and a screen, a distraction. I really wonder, from the psychological perspective, if people know what they do. And even if you tell them what they do, if they're going to really pay attention. Because I find that a lot with the Feculent Gnarl Maw, that no matter how many times I read a war scroll of the Feculent Gnarl Maw to somebody, they will avoid it like the damn plague, ironically. Even though it only will deal 1 mortal wound to them on a 4-up, and if they stay more than 3 inches away from it, I'm getting contagion to summon things. So I'm wondering if I end up with a similar scenario in testing with Beasts of Nurgle, like people just thinking they're more intimidating than they actually are.
You know what'll happen? Is they don't know what they are because they ignore them, Paul.
What size base is that thing on?
60.
Like a 60 round or a 60 by 35?
60 oval. Or 60 round, rather.
Okay.
Round. Nope. Sorry, man.
Yeah, I mean, here's what I'll say. Like, I get it, because they do have an interesting mobility aspect in that they have the weird thing where they can charge even when they run or retreat automatically. So they don't need the tree to run and charge, and they can retreat and still get back into combat, right? My problem is the wound ratio there to toughness just doesn't work for me at that points cost. Like, I get what you're saying. I do. Like, I understand, because to me, I think the way that you would, let's take points out of the equation for a minute, right? And just say, like, we have this piece. How do we optimally use it? And I think how we'd optimally use it is you'd swing them around the side and try to like basically pin units on the corner where they couldn't get enough attacks back at you, theoretically, especially in a sort of horde situation, right?
Yep.
To actually kill you. And then you would just retreat away, splash a few mortal wounds after having pinned them, and then either like pin something else or go run in the way to actually like body block something or whatever, right?
Yep.
You'd retreat and then go charge and hit a different corner after they've like piled towards you. You could literally just retreat out and then swing around and hit a different side where, again, they only have 1 or 2 guys. So you could even just do that so they can't eventually swarm around you.
But
like that's, to me, like I would suppose that's sort of the optimal usage, right? That being said, at 100, that's just so many points for what they are. Like, there's 7 wounds on a 5-up, 5-up, right? I mean, that's what we're talking about here. If they were 80, I'd say I'd be more inclined to say maybe. If they were 60, right, or 70, then okay. Like now I am a buyer at what you're talking about, right? I would put those things on the table for that.
At 60, yes. At 80, in a battalion, or if I needed to. At 100, get out of here.
Right. The problem is what they're competing against at that 100 points, right? That's just so much.
Yeah.
But it's an interesting pick.
Yeah. I think it's sort of like a pick of the future if they get their points reduced.
Sure. Yeah. Look, you buy stock when it's low, not when it's high, buddy. So I get it. This is a future pick. Like, points adjustments are coming eventually. So, we'll see what
they're obviously too high.
Sure.
I think that's pretty evident that they're too high.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how we came at 100 for those. That's a mystical number. All right, but no, interesting pick. I like it. It's very sideways. That's outside the box thinking. I think that's a one to watch. That's a stock to watch. I need my Jim Cramer soundboard, right? All right. Yeah. Tom, what's your pick, buddy? What do we got here?
Nothing. No,
just none. We've covered them all.
Yep. There's no other good things. No, I mean, what I would say is that, like, so I think that one that I would rate in the same space of like stock to watch, but I'm not a buyer yet, is and we've Paul, we've talked about this. Is Blowout.
Wow. I can't believe you're saying this. This guy. All right. What's happening to him that's going to make him good? How far down does he go?
If he was down at 220, I would buy him. So if he dropped 40 points.
Sure, because he's 260 right now, right?
And the reason why I won't buy him at 260 is because of because he's still a single caster.
Sure.
And I'm not buying a single caster at 260. I don't care what they do. But I will agree with Paul, and we've talked about this, that he has gained utility in the new world because -1 casting is a thing. Like, most people don't know that in addition to his -1 to hit aura, he also has a -1 to cast aura. And so he's a good midfield piece to shove into your opponent's face. They need to probably do something about. Again, I'm not a buyer at 260, but if he went, he's one to watch because, again, he's -1 to cast. And then it moves that Nagash dominance that was there. It begins to move it down the ladder.
Well, I mean, that dude does have to get within 14 inches to make that happen. That's not.
It's true. No, which is why I said he's a midfield. He's a midfield piece. Because
sure.
You're gonna want him close to combat behind your front line because of the -1 to hit. You're gonna want him nearby to be able to spit. That whenever that attack, if it does ever hit, you want him to be near the front line for it. And so again, he's a midfield piece. If his cost went down, I would be a buyer.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, the Demon Fly's ability is interesting because obviously we've got more annoying -1 to hit kind of interactions, right? So like, again, we can get to the place where you're just penalizing your enemy to the point where they're just only hitting your army on 6s, which is super fun.
And against some armies, though, like, that's what you need. Like, that is their counter.
Yep.
You know, what comes to mind is Night Haunt. Night Haunt is like universally hit on 4s. Like they're a Fire Slayer-esque army. And so doing stuff like this, that -1 to hit begins to swing things in a major way. Like if you can pull -2 to hit, like your Grimghast or one of those exceptions at 3-ups, that'll move them to 5s. Like suddenly those numbers are just they're not looking good.
Yeah, I don't know. And like
again, if he's one to watch if the cost goes down.
Fair enough.
At his current price, I'm not a buyer.
Okay, that's fair. I mean, I will certainly admit that if he was, 220, if he was basically Lord of Afflictions priced or whatever, right? I might be more interested in him. He has 4 more wounds, but yet I don't think he's as resilient as the Lord. He lacks certain keywords, like that's a challenge for him. Like he's not a demon, right?
And he's unique, so he can't carry artifacts.
Right, exactly. So yeah, sure. I'll say at 220 he could be interesting. I'm not even sure I'm really into him, but I'll agree with you that he would be vastly more interesting at 220. Like no doubt about that. I don't think he's going to drop that low, so I doubt this is a conversation we have to have, but that's fine. Fair enough.
Like of the Maggot Lords, he's the one I would run.
Yep. Sure. I mean, I think they're all kind of just, fine for what they are. Like they're super cool models that are great narrative pieces. That would be they've got a nice personality, Tom. That's what I'm saying.
Yep.
So my pick, and I don't want to leave here without eventually. We're going to talk about plague drones eventually, but I've got a different pick. Okay. My pick is going to be Pestabestigor. Okay.
I was gonna make that my round too.
Yeah, there you go. I'm gonna call him Pestabestigor so people don't think I mean regular gore, right? I think Pestabestigor are like stupid good. With even like a modicum of the synergy we've already discussed. It is a unit that is probably drastically undercosted and can obviously gain Nurgle through the battalion.
Yep.
I don't know if they're really that undercosted, but they're super good, is my point. I don't think that's in contention. I think everybody agrees that Bestigor are pretty great. I think you can run them MSU to great success. I think you can run them in larger numbers and they're still good. They have their own built-in +1 to hit as long as they're attacking models that have 10 or more models themselves. They have their own built-in +1 to attack to go up to 3 attacks. They can easily get up to 4 attacks through any of the previous things we've mentioned. So they can be a ridiculously good target for the aforementioned spells and mortal wound shenanigans. They have built-in run and charge, so they don't need tree placement, right? And they can be just, again, hyper fast. They can benefit from everything we've talked about and more, right? Like these guys can just be ungodly stupid lightning on the table because of their run and charge built in, because of, the other benefits of the movement that we've talked about, whether it be the bell or whether it be cogs or whether it be the wheel, right? Or whether it be their own guy, their own Bray shaman or whatever, the guy that adds another like 3 to their movement if he's standing near them, right?
Yep.
To the point where these guys can just like shoot off at 1,000,000 miles an hour and be across the table, right? They are maybe like in Nurgle, these are perhaps the fastest foot infantry in the game. Like I'm not sure that's the case. I haven't done the full math on everything, but they're in contention. That's all I'm saying. Like it's insane how fast they can move. Yeah. And then hit like a truck when they get there. They die fairly fast once they show up. These guys are not tough, not in any stretch. Like they have
a 4-up save, so that's not terrible.
Sure. And that's the beginning and end of it, right? Like, yes, they have a 4-up save and they're 10 wounds. If you've got the unit of 10.
Stacking, but there's no stacking defenses here.
Right. These are, to me, like, they are missiles. Like, I think that's why I like them in tenors. If there was ever, they're almost like a fire and forget missile. So I find them to be really interesting, and I don't know. I don't know that we've seen enough interaction of people playing with sort of the demon beasts armies yet to really see just how crazy we can get with these dudes. Because as cheap, destructive missile units that just fire off and kill targets, they show up and pretty easily will make 40 attacks.
Right.
That hit on an egregiously low number, wound on a reasonable number, have neg 1 rend and hit for 1 damage. So,
that's Witch Elf numbers.
Sure. They'll hit Witch Elf territory pretty fast.
And you know what? The defensive buff command ability that does impact them if you run a big block, Lord of Blights.
Yeah, sure.
Not sure that that's necessarily the choice that you want to go with, but if it's a concern, he's there.
Yeah, to me, the answer is don't try to lean into strength. Don't try to cover for weaknesses. Like, I'm a big play to your strengths guy. I don't like, some people talk about gilding the lily when you overstack things. I'm not sure that I've ever been a believer in that. Like, this one goes to 11, so let's just do that. For me, I like them in that role. They're the suicide troops of your army, and I think they perform quite admirably in that role. So
right, but you have to be invested in the battalion. So
sure.
you're building a list when you choose to add them to a Nurgle army.
Yes, but even with the battalion, they're not your whole army. That's what I would say, right?
Yeah.
Like, there is still space. You can take that battalion and fill out its requirements without capping your army. Okay.
And min-size units of Gores are cheap and generic battle.
Sure, absolutely. Yes. I don't remember exactly what the Nurgle battalion has the requirements of versus the optional of. I mean, basically anything in the army that's not Tzeentch is takeable by that battalion, right? For obvious reasons.
Yeah. It's just like 3 to 7 of like Gore, Ungore, Bestigore, I think, is like the only thing that it actually requires.
Yeah, I mean, if you're all in on it, I remember I put together a couple of these, demon-based armies, and, you're going to come out to like 12, like, depending on how you build it, you're going to come out between like 1,000 and 1,500 points, depending on how crazy and you go on it. So it's at least half to 3/4 of your army, but there's still space there to play around. So you're not totally tapped, is my point.
But that's typically like how your offensive package comes out with Nurgle anyway.
Sure. Yep. So, all right. Paul, I sense I stole your round 2 pick. What do you got? What's your second one in round 2? Put you on the spot.
I don't know. Yeah, I mean, you totally stole my thunder.
Would you like to move to either talk about A, Plague Monks, or B, Plague Drones? Both of which we should mention. Should at least get an honorable mention here.
Let's go to the drones.
Okay.
And I've been sort of having this interesting debate with myself. I've been working on the math hammer on it. I'm like, what's better, drones or Puscoils? To be using them as a strong hammer unit.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm still not sure what the answer is. I think units of 6 drones can hit like a truck. Like they do the same sort of role that Chaos Knights do. They are just coming in. They hit like a truck when they come in, and then they stick there and they stay there forever because they're a lot of wounds to shift.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, the drones win that fight. I think, and that's ultimately my problem. Like we mentioned Puscoils earlier, but when you look at how that unit responds, how those units respond to the buffs, right? To like a Guo buff or something like that. The problem is because of the number of drones and the way that, and the different profiles, they look very similar in the number of different attacks. But when you just calc it out and kind of roll it out, I think the drones just come out ahead. I mean, I haven't run the math on that, but that's my strong feeling is that's the case.
Well,
I've done
wave attacks, yes. But if I say wave attacks, yes, but if you have a Lord of Abominations backing him up, he's like you're going to shove them forward, right? He's going to.
You mean Lord of Afflictions or whatever?
Lord of Afflictions, sorry. Yeah, he's going to grant reroll ones to hit to all those attacks. Like so, like if you're already running him, like even though you have 2 less bodies, he has a passive buff, like an aura around him of reroll ones to hit. And so like he may actually swing the math the other direction, surprisingly. I would need to do the numbers, but I think everything hits on 3s for those profiles. And so I think it's like 3s reroll 1s.
You mean for the Puscoils?
Yeah, for the Puscoils.
No, they're big. They're big, like damaging one. I don't remember off the top of my head, but that's not true.
The Bell is a 4, but like I think everything else, like all the Blight Kings and like so the Riders.
Yeah, the dudes and the foul mouth parts are 3s, but the Dolorous Toxin and the Sting are both 4s, right?
Right.
And like the Dolorous Toxin and the Sting do a lot of work.
It does. It does.
Where are you seeing the reroll hits of 1?
It's the Lord of Afflictions, like his Rotbringer ability. The Plague Victor, reroll hit rolls of 1 for friendly Rotbringer units when they are within 7 inches of this model. It's an oft forgotten thing on the Lord of Afflictions, but it is a thing. He's so often out of position to actually use it, right? That it rarely comes up, but it is a thing. Yes.
And so like if you're running Puscoils, you're probably running it. Like you're probably running the Lord of Afflictions, which means that you're going to run them around as a pack, probably, which means that he may have that, and then he may also be able to have Rustfang. So, like, suddenly he moves their Ren to 1. Like, so, like, in the package, it depends on whether you want to run him with the pack. That's the question.
Yep. And even though he's not getting, like, the plus 8 inches himself to his movement, him clearing the whole board and getting into your opponent's lines turn 1 is not out of the question.
Sure.
I mean, I've done that on multiple occasions with Blight Kings, getting all the way across the table turn 1.
Well, you got to remember now, though, the starting scenarios are 18 inches, or most of them are. And so, like, getting across to the enemy line is much easier now than it was previously.
Well, that depends how heavy they're leaning on the new scenarios as opposed to a mix of all of them, right?
That's true. That's true.
If there's only one of the new 6, then who cares? Yeah, I mean, when I look at the drones, what I love about the drones is that they have their own built-in +1 to attack, and they can absorb the other +1 to attack, right? They have because they're well,
you have to run them with a hero in order to pick up that +1 to attack. And so, like, no matter what, like, so if you say that there's a Guo buffing them, then you also have to have another hero near them when they charge across the table.
I don't.
Which is probably going to be a Lord of Afflictions, just on what's going to be reliably close to them.
Right.
Again, I suppose it depends on how you're using them. If you're going for like some kind of hardcore zip across the board and smash into the enemy, then you could get yourself out of position pretty easy with a hero trying to buff them. But if that's not your goal, right? If instead you're using them as a counter strike, okay? Like if your goal is yeah, exactly. If your goal is to backfield them round 1, anvil up on a midfield point, let them come at you, say, "Come at me, bro," right? And then whatever comes at your anvil unit, your pack of, regular plague bearers that are out there, then gets counter swung by this ridiculous drone strike that comes in. Like, certainly at that point, you're going to easily be able to keep them within 7, right? So, I mean, I think it depends on, again, you have to understand, like, the strat of what you're aiming for with it, yeah?
Yep. That's true.
And the other, like, thing that isn't to be forgotten about them, I mean, it's not, like, the most likely thing in the world, but it is a thing, that they can battle shock themselves into adding a dude back, right? Like, because they're plague bearers, they absorb that, like, on a 1 you get a guy back. Like, that's not a bad thing to get a 5 wound drone back on the table. They're also bravery 10, which in a world of Mind Razor or whatever, it's not in, like you almost never actually care about Battle Shock with them, just given the number of them. So these are little things in their favor. These are sort of the intangibles, but it's a thing. Like it is a good deal harder to Mind Razor drones than it is to Mind Razor Puscoils, right? Like you can be asleep and get a leadership 9 on your witch elves. It's very hard. You have to work a lot harder to crack leadership 10.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
All right. So Tommy, you want to talk about plague monks because plague monks is a thing.
No, not really. I mean, I don't know. I've never seen him in action.
That's a mean joke, Tom. That's a mean joke. That's not true. 5 of them out of that 80 did get to attack you because you got yourself out of position for your Mind Razor.
Yeah, actually, I didn't. I misread that rule. It's okay because the holy like because of I didn't. We're fine.
You did, but okay.
So we were talking about something.
We were talking about plague monks.
Plague monks. So
plague monks who traditionally, like, their advantage is they're hyper cheap for just a massive amount of attacks.
Yes.
Right? Like that's what you're going for here. We've talked a lot about attack stacking and stuff like this, and that you can manufacture these units that's just, tons of dumb rats that just make out egregious numbers of attacks. And also, by the way, have little fringe benefits of all their different little icons and bells and nonsense that can do interesting little things, including additional penalty to charge rolls.
Yeah, I mean, what I would say about plague monks is this: I am not convinced. Like, they have a lot of attacks, but they don't synergize as well with a lot of the Nurgle stuff as you would think. And what I mean by that is they don't have the right keywords. Like, they need, for example, they have to have a Glotkin. They have to have a Glotkin for their +1 attacks because like they don't have the demon keywords and stuff like that. So I mean, they're fine enough, but I think that people like them a lot more than I think that they're actually valuable. Does that make sense?
It does. I'm actually a sell on them as well. I think just because I do respect their number of attacks, but in a world of everything else we've talked about, I'm not sure that they fill a role I really need here. I can generate a lot of high damage, high number of attacks things through lots of the ways we've talked about that end up being a lot more resilient than 0 save. Right? Just like 1 wound rats with no save that if not properly battle shocked immune can sort of blow up pretty easy. Right.
Yeah. I think another big problem with them is that they are Pestilence battle line, not generic battle line.
Sure.
Yeah. If they were like Nurgle battle line, it'd be great. But because they're not Nurgle battle line, like, I hate to say it, they aren't battle line like we had a conversation with an opponent. Like, you can't run them as battle line unless you are Pestilence Allegiance.
Right.
The way that Allegiance has changed, it's just it's a non-starter. So
yeah, you can't claim them as battle line. You can't like take the Pestilence Allegiance and move up to Nurgle or something because that's a lateral move, not an upward move. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so that means if you're running plague monks, that means they're taking away from like an offensive unit slot, which like pretty much everything in Nurgle is better than that. Not everything, but most of your choices are better than that.
Yeah, I'm not sure there's not like some kind of Glotkin Plague Monk list that's almost just that, right? Like almost exclusively that. Not really everything, but like, you know what I mean? Like some kind of ridiculous fleshy abundance, everything in a range gets a bonus attack, and I'm just going to drown you in rats army, right? Where it's just like...
Oh, I think there could be like a 240 Plague Monk army.
Right.
Like, I think
it's something like that, where it's just like an innumerable amount of bodies. We're like, a unit of 40 is going to blow up, and I'm going to literally not care because here comes 80 more at you making 240 attacks or whatever, right? Just like, nonsense.
But at the same price point, I believe, couldn't you just run Marauders? And now they have a save and they're mortals so that you can buff them with a Harbinger of Decay and...
Yeah, but you're just like Plague Monks just gen more attacks. They gen so many attacks because they come like when you run them with
They
the
have 2-weapon profile, so
Yeah.
the +1 to attack adds to both weapons.
Right.
So that +1 attack actually goes to +2.
Yeah, I mean they can go absolutely egregious in their number of attacks. Like that is not to be argued with. And by the way, I think that we've talked a lot about the value of shooting.
Yeah.
Going down or going up or whatever, like being on the move. Let's just say it that way. Okay. I think the value. So here's my current opinion. I wouldn't call this a hot take because I don't think it is, but I think the value of Rend has diminished in the current meta. I think Rend 1 is good, and I think pushing beyond that is often irrelevant. The Seraphon threat hasn't manifested, which is an army largely immune to Rend 1.
Sure.
Right. Ghosty boys don't care. Witches don't tend to care. Right. Like a lot of the armies that are out there, like I think Rend Neg 1 is pretty important still. And I think beyond that, who cares more or less. Right. But I think oftentimes just a volume of attacks can still make up for it. Even the Stormcast units that are out there, like Stormcast is the big question. They're the armor boogeymen. Right.
Yep.
And so the question is, how much does that influence it? Like, yes, you've got a nutcrack. I don't disagree. And like, I'm not trying to say you auto lose to Stormcast because I don't think you do. Stormcast have their own challenges with like bodies to be able to take points. You have many of the things we've talked about in this army would give you a body advantage. And I'm not sure, like, yeah, sure. In the situation I just described, like good luck cracking a Seki unit. I don't disagree that is a thing. Okay. But at the same time, there's a whole lot of armies you're going to play that as long as like you've got Rend Neg 1, you're not really going to run into any challenges. Like it's just a lot of dominant stuff in the meta right now that is a perfectly fine answer to.
And my actual experience having been playing a lot of Nurgle is that Stormcast in particular is actually a really good matchup for Nurgle.
Like it's a bad matchup for Nurgle, or it's a good matchup?
It's a good matchup.
Favorable to Nurgle.
Favorable to Nurgle. You have so many armor debuffs available to you.
That you can just call out on demand.
Yeah, you can just pull out on demand. I mean, you have, Rend 1 across your army basically with Blight Cyst. That plus, pick a spell or a Rust Fang. I mean, yeah, Sequiturs are good, but I mean, if you have at least Rend 1 or more than that heading into them, they're going to go down a lot faster than you might think.
Yeah, I mean, I will say that at this point, like the last army really carrying the banner of like high armor is Stormcast, right? That has a high prevalence, right? Yep. There are other high armored armies. I'm not saying they don't exist. I'm just saying they don't have the prevalence percentage in the meta, right? So you could easily play a tournament and not see them. They're the last ones. And, if come a time where Sekis have a point adjustment, as I would certainly think will probably happen, and by that I mean they'll go up, not down. If Stormcasts slip in the meta at all, I think that the value of Rend continues to fall. And in general, for stuff like Blight Kings or Plague Drones, drones themselves make a ton of attacks and have very low Rend, right? I mean, that's just a thing that is true.
Yep.
But like the more that kind of stuff is pushed out, the more the value of these kinds of things increases, right?
Yep.
And that's sort of an intangible that's not on their scroll, but it's nonetheless, I think, true. All right. We've been going for a while. We probably need to wrap this up sometime soon, but this is always what happens, and that's fine.
Oh yeah.
We shouldn't leave without having a little discussion about Battalions. So let's talk about some battalions. Okay. You have we've already tangentially touched on a lot of these. I think that the Beast of Chaos battalion that turns your Nurgle stuff has gas in the engine just for doing that thing. I think it's actually quite an interesting build out that can happen in a couple of different ways. Again, I don't know that it's like the best thing in the world, but I think it's got gas for an army build.
Sure.
Again, I think Blightsist is actually overrated. I'm not saying bad. I can't get behind bad, but I do think it's overrated.
Yeah, it leaves you with a major problem of bodies on board.
Right. So what are our picks here? Like, do we, like, are we down with a Taliban of Nurgle? Like, is there Taliban that hasn't happened?
I think there is.
Okay.
And I think that because, particularly if you're running a drone heavy list, you can run drones in the list in that battalion. You run a bunch of plague bearers as your battle line. You can throw a Guo in there into that battalion. It's making your plague bearers even more resilient. It's making your Guo and your plague drones a little bit more resilient. It's lowering your drops, and it's giving you an extra command point and an extra artifact. So I think it's giving you, it's not, the battalion itself is not doing extraordinary things. But I think it's because of, in general, what it does, like what's included in it, and what the role of those things is, I feel like it's not bad. Like,
what's the current cost on the Taliban? What's it clocking in at? I don't know its current cost.
220, I think. So it's a little expensive.
Sure, but I mean, all battalions are now, which probably rightly so.
Yeah, but I mean, if you're running, say, 4 min-size units of plague bearers or 3 min-size units of plague bearers and 130, having those restore D3 models every hero phase is like, that makes for some really tough to deal with chaff.
Sure. Okay. All right. Yeah, I mean, I'm on the fence on that one. I mean, again, it does set a lot of your army, but I'm not sure it's not the stuff you wouldn't be taking anyways in several builds. Right? Like, that is to say, it's a great let's just say it's a great unclean one, a herald, and 3 plague bearers and a drone unit or something like that, or flip that script, right? Whatever you want. Like, if that was already to be the core of your army, then probably, right? Because I have found that you can dump that number of points into a battalion, and it's generally worth it for the bennies you get out of it. And as we've talked about, like, the command point capability, just to start with more than one is pretty potent. This army has a million uses for command points, right? Yeah. Between the fact that you have run and charge built in, so you're very often, like, sometimes setting a run on a 6 is any army that can run and charge with reliability, that command ability that sets your run to a 6, its value just skyrockets immediately, right? Yep. So, like, this army just has all the reason in the world to want extra command points and will make very, very good use of them. Yeah. All right. Fair enough. Okay.
Tom's making faces.
Tom, what are you thinking about? You thinking about some thrice-fold befoulment?
No.
Okay.
I still haven't actually seen a thrice-fold list in action.
I mean, it won Blood and Glory, right?
Yeah.
It was that Terry. No, Russ won with a thrice-fold. I mean, it's good. There are some scenarios. I was reading the Maggot WhatsApp group. There are some of those thrice-fold that just auto lose, and that's part of the problem. So it's just a bad matchup for some of them.
Yeah. And they're not offensively powerful enough to just go kill an army.
Right. Yeah, I mean, what I would say is, no, I'm actually looking at Pestilent Throng, because I was just looking at, like, a mixed list, and, like, you could get a Pestilent Throng min size for 240, 440, 540.
What's in the Pestilent Throng?
The only requirements are basically 3 battle line, 80-point battle line units, and the shaman. And then the battalion's 200. And so, like, you could get your entire battle line core, like min core, for 540 with a hero that gives +3 inches to move. Now, like, you could buff that up and buy more bodies. And
oh, yeah. You're talking about the Beast of Chaos battalion.
Yes. Yeah, Beast of Chaos, yeah. And so, like, but it's a battalion that you can get your min core out of the way for 540.
Sure.
As a 1-drop to pick up an artifact and a command point as well. And that's not a terrible buy, is what I would say. So I think that there's definitely some possibility there, is what I would say.
Are the rest of the battalions too questionable right now? Like, you look at Affliction Cyst, Blight Cyst, and Plague Cyst. Are they all too questionable because they're all built on the back of the Blight King units, which are all themselves of questionable value right now because because you're sort of in a meta where there's a lot of big hordes and stuff like that. You're sort of hemmed in, that it causes overinvestment in a unit that is, like, objectively not set up to win in the scenarios that are out there right now. Is that just an innate weakness of those 3 battalions?
Yes, I would say so.
Because I think that, to me, I don't think Blight Kings are bad by any stretch, but I don't think they have they are not build an army around these things, right? Like, that is to say, like, they should be your whole 2,000 points, which is often what Blight Cyst will amount to, right? Like, they end up being the vast majority of your army. They sort of 80-20 rule, right? Yeah. And I certainly don't think the Pus Whales hit that mark.
Not even close.
And so, again, not that you have to build like that, but I mean, most of them are pretty big. They're both, 3 units min of Blight Kings? Is that right?
Yep.
Plus the relevant Lord?
Yeah, all of it's 3 units.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, it's not that Blight Kings are that expensive. Certainly, you could get away relatively cheap, but, you could go min 5ers or something, but still.
I mean, really, realistically, it's like 900 or 8, like, it's close to 1,000 on all of them.
Yep.
It's half your army.
Then Nurgle's Menagerie is terrible. The 2 mega battalions are terrible. Thricefold is a weird niche thing. I feel like Taliban at this point is, like, I feel like I would fit it in a lot of occasions just because I'm probably going to be running all of the stuff that are in the requirements anyway.
Yeah, I'd say like a min-sized Taliban is what I was just thinking about. But even then, it feels like a min-sized Taliban is pushing it. Like, and because I want to run Pus Coils and I can't run Pus Coils in a min, like, yeah.
But you don't want to be completely Pus Coils like that. You don't want that as your whole army. Yeah, I think the 3 towers or 2 towers idea is interesting. Again, I think that's sort of the best in breed list. Just to circle back to this.
I've been doing the math, like, as we've been sitting here, trying to figure out, like, what, like, a 2 towers would look like.
Mm-hmm.
I have been too.
Yeah.
That is basically the next sort of archetype that I'm going after.
Yeah, what's interesting to me, so the list, by the way, that I'm going to screw this up because I don't have it right in front of me, so I apologize, Dan. But the list that did well, that Nurgle list, the one we talked about, was a really interesting menagerie of, like, Rodigus, the Chaos Lord plus the Knights. There was like 30 Plague Bearers, just a lot of different abilities. What was interesting about it was it did operate very much on these interesting power pairs, but it also had this neat ability to, so he had all the things that just sort of, like, sprinkled mortal wounds around the table.
Yep.
Right. And so there was, which I think is actually insanely powerful in the current meta.
Yeah.
So between the wheel and Rodigus and other elements that were there was a lot of, like, mortal wound sprinkling.
Yeah.
These pick these D3 units, they take D3, or this number of units take D3, or this and this and this, right? So what you end up doing is just, like, there are a lot of armies right now that their strength comes from the synergy of 5 wound heroes.
Yep.
right?
Mhm.
And it can often be fairly difficult to get rid of them through melee because those guys are usually on small bases and usually quite highly bubble wrapped, right? Which is something that holds Nurgle back because they don't have a lot of shooting to pick them off. There's a lot of shooting they're fairly resistant to thanks to Lookout Sir, right? As well as other things they might have going on. But they don't often have a huge amount of mortal wound protection, if any, right? And so being able to just go like to drop 2d3 on them, there's a shot, you just killed them right there.
Right.
Right? Yeah. Oh, thank you. Yeah, Dan was nice enough to post the list. Rodriguez, 10 Knights, 2x5 Blight Kings, 30 Plague Bearers, Festus, the Lord on Demonic Mount, the Sork Lord on Manicore, and 2x5 Hellstriders, which I do love the 2x5 Hellstrider inclusion because it's just pushing that extra, like, it has this interesting ability to sort of reach out, bunker, and penalize, right? And then just as it's bunkered in, it can pick off your key pieces so you can't manifest enough strength to break their bunkers, right? You look at like Khorne, you look like a lot of armies exist in this space where they want like they're relying on the synergy of these X models. And by the way, a lot of those abilities that do sprinkle those mortal wounds around, a lot of them are either don't care about range at all, right? Like they're not a range delimited thing from a point of origin, or they have a very decent range, right? Not all, but many. Which again says like, go ahead and be wherever you want. It doesn't matter. I'm coming for you. Right.
Yeah, I've got to say, I read that list and I looked up the sorcerer on Manticore because I hadn't looked at it a long time. And then I saw it was 200 points. And I was like, what the hell? How is this 200 points?
Yeah, he's an interesting one. The sorcerer, the Sork Lord on Manicore is just like a thing that I don't know when the last time anybody read him is.
Compared to the sorcerer on horse, who's 160.
Sure. Well, I mean, admittedly, like he's a 12 wound dude with a 4-up save. His combat ability is still more or less nil. Like, let's be clear, okay? To borrow your statement, this guy doesn't kill anything.
A 4-up save.
Sure. But I mean, the reason you take him is because of the two things. One, he's got the auto built-in buff, just like his little brother of the oracular visions, right? Where he can just hand somebody to reroll saves of 1 every round. So he basically free mystic shields 1 unit around now, right? And that's what he does. He's without casting the spell. He's like, here, you take this mystic shield. I don't need it, right? And then he has the Wind of Chaos spell, which again, admittedly, is a more difficult cast on the 7, but still. You pick a visible unit with an 18 and roll a number of dice equal to the total casting roll that was rolled for the spell. So, 7 minimum or whatever. And for each roll of a 5, it's 1 mortal wound. And if you roll a 6, it's D3. So again, it's just more mortal wound pooping, right? It's just, and there's nothing wrong with just pointing that at a hero and melting them, right? Like that's what you're going to use it for. You don't really, or if you need to unstick a unit or something from combat, but most of the time you're just going to point that at a hero with an 18 and melt their face because it's going to be pretty good at killing that 5 wound hero statistically.
Yes.
So yeah, he's an interesting choice for a low cost. We hadn't talked about him earlier, but he's a worthwhile mention. Yeah. Anything else we want to mention as we wrap up Nurgle here? What else? Like there are so many different lists I want to see people try with Nurgle because the variance is so vast here. And I'm not sure that there's not some really great combos once you move away, even perhaps moving away from like a lot of the maybe Plague Throng has more interesting gas and that's a battalion to go, maybe Taliban. But I think there's a lot of interesting non-battalion combinations too.
Yeah, that's actually what I was just sitting here running some numbers on. And I think there's some interesting lists is what I would say. Sure.
Yeah. The other interesting one that we have not mentioned at all yet is, we had brought up the issue of being very hungry for command points.
Sure.
And we have not brought up Archeon.
Oh, the just using it to sound off a bunch of abilities.
Yeah. Well, and if you look at Archeon overall in a Nurgle list,
Yeah.
He's getting a spell, and he can pick from any of the spell lores. Well, actually, he can't pick from the Rotbringer spell lore, but he can pick from the Mortal or the Demon spell lore.
Yeah.
And you can back him up with a Harbinger of Decay. Now you got to give him a 5-up ward save. You're activating all of these other possible command abilities. He's a beat stick on his own. One of those command abilities can also be either a Great Unclean One or your Glotkin that are giving him +1 attack across his whole profile. And then his sword, what is it, the World Ender? Kingslayer. That's Slayer of Kings. That goes off when you
double 6 on your wound.
Right, you double 6 on your wound, but it's 6+. So if you are on the +1 to wound spot on your Nurgle wheel, it buffs that and makes it much more likely.
Yeah, I mean, you also could, if you wanted, pull Plague Monks. They have a +1 to wound prayer as well. That you can drop in there to make that more likely as well. Yeah, I don't know, is what I would say. Like, you have no idea. Like, I have an Archeon Nurgle conversion that, like, I wanted to do in this handbook. Like, I was waiting for this General's Handbook, and if he was going to be costed appropriately, I was going to do a Nurgle. I know. I was going to do a Nurgle Archeon conversion. And
was it gonna be super gross?
Say what?
Was he going to be super gross?
Yes, it was going to be awesome. It was going to be my favorite conversion ever. But like, I couldn't make the list in anything that I would be happy with. Then that was the problem.
Yeah, look, there's a reason I built that guy, because I believe the only good Archeon is in Slaanesh right now, because what you don't see on him, okay, is what you can't see in the span of this model is the Exalted Seeker Chariot he's hiding. But it's back there. It's behind the building, because that guy's 19 depravity points waiting to happen, plus whatever he kills. Right? Like in Slaanesh, our heroes have such a higher dividend because of the way depravity works.
Right.
And it pays this off. Like, he's not adding anything to the Nurgle allegiance. Like, I don't disagree. The problem is that he's so expensive.
Yeah, the key is with Nurgle, with their command, Nurgle has tons of great command abilities that would be awesome to have on all the time.
Yep.
Like, that's the key with Nurgle, is that if you can get the right suite of command abilities. But the problem is that what you really want to pair him with is Glotkin. But at that point, I mean, that's the reality. But at that point, I mean, it's just so expensive.
I mean, what you really want to pair him with are cheap-ass Slaanesh heroes that make him attack twice, and that make your whole army attack twice. No, I'm not trying to deviate into Slaanesh here. I'm just saying, like, you can just achieve what you need to here, because you're not needing to fire off 6 heroes command abilities every turn, right? What you're needing is to execute on 1 or 2 key command abilities every turn that create these nice synergies. And you can do that through battalions or an Aether Quartz brooch or saving 50 points for an extra command point or whatever. You just, like, what you need are the points, not firing off the huge number of heroes. Usually 2 heroes are what you're trying to get at. Right. And then the other stuff is the other stuff. And, like, you're trying to get the Lord on Demonic Mount plus a Guo or whatever. Right. So I think there's just no way he pays himself off versus what you're getting off of, like, I mean, he's like a Guo and 2 Light King units, right? Or something crazy like that. I mean, I don't know, right?
Is he 660?
The way I think of it, he's basically like a Guo and a battalion.
Sure. He's so much. Like, I don't know. I'd love to be proven wrong because I love the guy. Like I love Archaon to death. I think he's one of the greatest models they've made, and I mean, freaking own 2 of the dude, so I clearly love him. But I can't see him in Nurgle. I don't know what he's paying off.
Yep, I just thought he was an interesting point of discussion.
No, absolutely. I think you're absolutely right. He is. Archaon always comes up in every chaos discussion, right? Because he is the Grand Master of the Apocalypse, the ever chosen, the Lord of all chaos. So, you know, if you have a chaos discussion, he should be talked about.
Yeah. You know what has not come up in any of our discussion?
What's that?
Anything from Tamerkan Horde.
Yeah, I mean, that's because, like, it's a weird... I don't know that any of their units are really incredibly good anymore post the points adjustments. Like, the distinct Forge World ones, like the Plague Toads and, you know, that kind of stuff. Like pre-points adjustments, there was some really interesting things going on there. Post-points adjustments, I'm not sure that's the case. That being said, like, the Tamerkan's Horde allegiance itself is very interesting and probably worth exploring. So, and you can use that with basically the stuff we've talked about with a few exceptions. So, and I'm not sure, like, again, if you have some kind of extra, you know, battalion floating in there, so you've got a second magic item. I don't know that you're losing that much. I don't know. Hard to say. Because they do have some pretty great stuff going on.
Yeah.
Any other final thoughts we want to mention, gentlemen, before we leave the great grandfather behind here?
No, he will not be left behind. He is eternal.
Sure, absolutely. He brings us endless gifts every year, and we all have that to look forward to here at Nurgle Moss. So, but all right, in that case, I think that wraps up our revisit to Nurgle. What I'm hoping to see is people explore more lists in 2019. Continuing, I want to see Nurgle get into, you know, lots of top 10s, exploring different lists like what Dan was doing. I think that's great. I want to see more people try those kinds of things. So bring it on, Nurgle players. You got all the freedom in the world. You got the deepest bench of any army in the universe. So let's see that variance. All right. Paul, as always, buddy, it's an absolute pleasure. We will have you back on again, so you can continue your dominance. I'll have to call up Mitch, bring him back or something. That way we'll get him back in here. So
what we need to do is have me and Mitch on at the same time, and we can like for it.
Maybe get Tyler Emerson in here too. I imagine he's probably a contender up there. I don't know. I need to go look.
I think he's pretty far up there too.
Yeah, then we'll just do like a 5-hour show because God knows that's what the output of that would be. But for all of you out there, we certainly appreciate you watching. As always, we'll see you next Wednesday.